Two arrests have been made. I do understand at this point that one is a Gupta family member.
We are standing outside the Union's buildings here at the nation's capital, where it's expected that sometime today President Jacob Zuma will give some type of a briefing to indicate his response as the ANC has decided to recall him. We know that the ANC caucus is also eagerly awaiting for that response from the president so they can decide their next course of action.
The High Court is today expected to rule on Patricia de Lille's application to have a secret ballot during a vote of no confidence against her during a council meeting tomorrow. And of course, Kendall Makamate is standing by to give us some of our sporting highlights this morning. A very good morning to you, Kendall. You good?
Very good morning to you, Shante. Thank you very much. We've got a whole lot of sport to cover, even amongst this very busy news. This is what we've got for you for today.
Big appeal and given. It's game, set and match.
The Proteas put in another awful display of indifferent cricket and get swept aside by India in the fifth ODI, losing the match by 73 runs and the series with it.
Well, history has been achieved in Port Elizabeth, winning by 73 runs. That is.
And that's what we've got for you now. Back to the main desk with Shante. Let's got the news.
Thank you very much, Kendall. Very good morning to you. Welcome to SABC Newsroom. I'm Shante Yankees. Your top story at 9 o'clock. The Hawks have reported to have made 2 arrests during the current raid on the Gupta residence in Saxonwold. On the ground, covering the story for us, is our reporter, Griselda Lewis. Very good morning to you. Of course, when Griselda is ready, she cannot take us live at the moment, and she will be giving us live updates on what is actually happening outside the Gupta Saxonwold compound in Johannesburg. Moving on, President Jacob Zuma is expected to respond to the ANC's decision to recall him when he briefs the media from the Union buildings in Pretoria today. Well, the ANC Secretary-General Ace Magashule announced yesterday that the party's National Executive Committee had decided to recall Zuma from his deployment as president, but said no deadline had been given. The party says the president had asked for a 3 to 6 month notice period before resigning, but that this had been rejected. Magashule also said that no deal had been struck with Zuma on leniency from any possible prosecution. Meanwhile, the Thabo Mbeki Foundation has welcomed the move to recall the president, saying he should now communicate with the Speaker of Parliament and tender his resignation as President of South Africa. ANC National spokesperson Pule Mabe earlier spoke to SABC News on the number of reasons why President Jacob Zuma has been recalled.
A recall of a sitting president of the Republic is one form of dealing with that kind of a transition.
So in a nutshell, the only reason that's been given by the ANC that President Jacob Zuma is being recalled is purely for transitional purposes, nothing else. Well,
I'm sure that you will appreciate that when the National Executive Committee sit to deliberate on this and many other issues, it will have applied its mind to numerous other details. You know, and in this instance, the feeling was that, look, we're going into elections in 2019. It is important that we prepare our machinery so that our structures are geared for those processes. Yeah. So we felt that it might be necessary that you begin with that process much earlier.
Pule, there's also reports circulating, and especially if you're giving the reason as transitional purposes behind the recall of President Jacob Zuma, there are absolute firm reports doing the round that President Jacob Zuma may reach out to the Constitutional Court for this recall. Is this something that you can confirm to us? I mean, is this in the pipeline? Have you heard anything?
Well, I must confirm that the ANC, when our continuous interactions with President Zuma, who has been president of the ANC, who is a loyal and disciplined cadre of the movement, have been quite cordial. I mean, relations are not strained. So we firmly believe that President Zuma remains a disciplined member of the ANC and would do what is best for a cadre of the movement to be able to allow the National Executive Committee to process his decisions, because he led the ANC. There were times when the collective he led had taken decisions, and he had to make sure that he act to implement those. I mean, I had an opportunity of serving with him in the previous collective, and I can assure you of the discipline of President Zuma. And I don't think that we should be second-guessing him. You know, I think we should allow him that space to be able to brief the nation and I can assure you that as he does that, he will also make sure that the interest of the people of South Africa and that of the ANC is placed first. Because President Zuma was part of the National Liberation Project, and understand why we must move this country forward.
Let me just quickly, there's one or two more questions I need to ask you. This deadline, because yesterday Ace Magashule said there is no deadline, the president's got as long as he wants to. But before that it was said that there's a 48-hour deadline, which of course ends today. Is there or isn't there a deadline?
Well, you see, Leanne, in the newsroom, a deadline might mean different things.
No. 48 hours is 48 hours.
Yes, I'm actually going there.
Okay,
I'm saying a deadline might mean different things.
Yeah.
One, the fact that the Secretary General of the ANC had already made it clear that the National Executive Committee, in arriving at this decision, had said it would prefer that President Ramaphosa delivers the State of the Nation's address, and also said that it would prefer that the State of the Nation's address is delivered before the budget speech. You will know that one thing like the budget speech is quite prescriptive by law. It has got to happen before the 1st of March so that we can begin with our program to deliver services to the masses of our people and all of that.
Okay, so the deadline?
So I'm just saying, if you look at the fact that you need to have Sona much
so today
sooner,
is the deadline, is what you're saying. Today is the deadline. President Jacob Zuma has to respond today.
He has already given that undertaking to the officials.
So he's given that undertaking.
Yes.
And just finally, Sona, is it going to happen? Are we going to have a State of the Nation address? I mean, constitutionally,
yes.
Do we really have to have one?
Yes, well, we are going to have a State of the Nation's address. And that State of the Nation's address, in terms of what the ANC has already placed on record, is that it must be addressed by President Ramaphosa, who has got to ascend as the President of the Republic.
Well, the Hawks are carrying out a raid at the residence of the Gupta family in Saxonwold in Johannesburg. We cross now live to Griselda Lewis. Very good morning to Griselda. Can you give us an update with regards to the arrest? We do know earlier, speaking to Leanne on Morning Live, of course, you said your high sources had confirmed that indeed only 2 arrests have been made. What more details do you have on that?
Well, Shante, I've just received a statement from the Hawks just a few moments ago. And the Hawks, if I could just read this, saying that they're currently conducting an ongoing operation at various addresses in Gauteng, including a residential premises in Saxonwold near Johannesburg. Well, that's where we've been broadcasting from this morning. And the Hawks are saying the operation is in respect of the ongoing investigations relating to corruption cases. And they're saying details will be made available at a later stage. That's just a statement that has been released by the Hawks a few moments ago. Well, the information that we have, Shante, at this stage is that 2 arrests have been made. One is a Gupta family member and one is a business associate. Unfortunately, at this stage, because they've not appeared in court, we cannot mention their names, but we do understand that one of the associates that I did mention is from Oak Bay Investments. And we understand also that the Hawks are also eyeing 13 other suspects in relation to the Estida Dairy Farm in Vrede relating to corruption, and the other 2 are relating to another leg of the state capture investigation. That's the word that we're getting in Saxonwold here this morning. We unfortunately cannot release the names of those who have been arrested. They've not appeared in court, but we do understand that the Hawks are eyeing 15 other suspects, 13 related to the Proteas farm in the Free State, that corruption scandal there, as well as 2 other suspects relating to the investigation into state capture. Not much is being said at this point. Not much information is given out by the Hawks. The statement itself is quite vague at this point, but we certainly can confirm that those 2 arrests have been made, and perhaps the Hawks would give an official statement on that at a much later stage. It's much more quiet here at the Saxonwold home of the Guptas here this morning. Much of the police officers who had been here together with the Hawks as well have left. It's very difficult to see what's happening behind those high walls there, but a bit earlier on, when we did manage to get a glimpse when the gates had been opened, we had seen quite a large police contingent in there, and every time the gate itself is opened, it's quickly closed. There's also a very strong presence of private security personnel here who we suspect are the ones who are guarding the Gupta home here, but much of the police contingent that has left here at this stage is inside and not much outside, apart from the journalists who are camping outside here to try and get more information. But what we can confirm at this stage is those 2 arrests, one a Gupta family member, one a business associate linked to Oak Bay Investments, and we also understand that the Hawks are eyeing 13 other suspects linked to the Proteas farm investigation, as well as 2 others linked to a leg of the state capture investigation. Shante.
Definitely. Thank you very much for giving us that update there. Our reporter on the ground for SABC News, Griselda Lewis. All the details regarding the Saxonwold compound raid by the Hawks, also giving us the official statement that has just been released by the Hawks. Of course, the Hawks, they're reporting and now being confirmed by our reporter that 2 arrests have been made at the current Gupta residence in Saxonwold. Of course, for the latest on the breaking story, we are also joined on the phone line by Hawks spokesperson Hangwani Mudlaudzi. A very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us on SABC Newsroom. What else can you confirm with regards to the arrests that have been made at the Gupta compound this morning? All right, we will be giving you more live updates, reactions, as well as confirmation from both our reporters on the ground as well as a representative from the Hawks. But moving on, after much confusion as to whether President Jacob Zuma's media briefing will happen, it has now emerged that indeed it will happen at 10 o'clock this morning. We now cross live to our reporter, presidential correspondent Nzwandile Mbeje, who will be taking us by that. He is in Pretoria. As soon as Mzwandile is able to talk to us, we will be getting a word from him as to the current situation on the ground. Well, ANC chairperson Gwede Mantashe has warned that the party will be forced to subject President Jacob Zuma to the humiliation of a vote of no confidence or even impeachment if he fails to respect the party's decision to recall him. President Zuma has been recalled by the ANC and is yet to reply to the recall. Mantashe was addressing party members in Butterworth in the Eastern Cape, saying that the president has 48 hours to make his decision.
A report back to the rural constituency amid tensions and uncertainty as the recall process drags on. Contrary to the no-deadline statement by the Secretary General, Mantashe says the next plan of action will be set in motion if no desirable steps are taken by the President within 48 hours.
We never wanted the President of the ANC to be subjected to vote of no confidence, impeachment, and all those things. We hoped that the President of the ANC will see reason and step down himself.
So the first step has been taken? And
yes,
the second one
has been taken. The letter has been sent to him. That's why you talk of 48 hours.
Mantashe was quick to point out that they will have to submit their own motion of no confidence rather than support the one by opposition parties.
You don't allow your soldiers to be commanded by enemy generals. I think it's a correct position. You must never allow your MPs to be commanded by the command structure of the opposition.
But the outcome is going to be the same. But
Fine. The outcome is going to be the same, but it should be an ANC outcome.
Madashe says they expect a favorable response from President Zuma no later than Wednesday. Unatipin was SABC News, Butterworth.
Well, after much confusion as to whether President Jacob Zuma's media briefing will happen, we have got confirmation it will happen at 10 a.m. this morning. Zandile for SABC News, our presidential correspondent, is standing by, taking us through the details as to what we can expect leading up to 10 o'clock. A very good morning to Zandile. Any activity that indicates that the media briefing will begin anytime soon this morning?
Thank you very much, Shante. Let me right at the outset clarify the issue of the media briefing at 10 o'clock. There has been no official communication from the presidency with regards to the media briefing that everyone is reporting on, that it has to take place at 10 o'clock. In fact, there has been a communication just now from the presidency saying actually repeating the fact that they have not issued any communication to that effect, but what they will do is that later on or sometime today, should there be a need, then they will issue the advisory to tell us exactly what time that press briefing will happen. So I just want to make sure that the issue of 10 o'clock is clarified. But here outside the union buildings, there are throngs of journalists, of course, in anticipation of what might happen today. Remember, the Secretary General of the ANC, Isma Khashule, said the president was going to respond today after they had given him the letter of recall. And of course, you know that the parliamentary caucus of the ANC has been immediately called to deliberate on this issue. And we understand that the meeting of the caucus was supposed to start after the response by the president. So I would assume that the president, perhaps whatever decision he has taken, would be able to communicate it through the right channels to his party, and perhaps later on he will then inform the nation of what is it that he will do following his recall from the highest office by the governing party.
Now, Zandile, at the moment, everything is pretty much hearsay as to what we can expect, and there seems to be a bit of a state of panic and a state of the unknown. Being speculative, what could we essentially expect coming out of the media briefing if it does take place this morning? Remember,
the governing party is the one that deploys its cadres to serve in various roles in government. President Zuma was assigned that responsibility by the ANC to be the president of the ANC. The leadership has then decided that, well, given that there has been changes in December, perhaps they want to take a new direction, so they would rather have their new leadership that perhaps takes that direction. So with that said, President Zuma has always said in public platforms that whatever the ANC tells him to do, he will do. Now that the highest decision-making body in between conferences has taken a decision that he be recalled from the highest office, quite honestly, I don't think there will be any other outcome to this other than the president acceding to that request from his party. Because, I mean, if he were to be seen to be defying the directive from his party, and then that may lead to many questions as to was he serving on his own or was he serving at the behest of the party. So my expectation is that the president will accept the decision of his party and, of course, move on.
Now, can we unpack why there seems to be so much confusion in the first place as to whether there is actually going to be a media briefing or not? Of course, we've heard Minister Gupta speaking on another news channel confirming that there would be a media briefing. And then on the other hand, we have the presidency saying that they've not necessarily issued out a formal statement that a formal media briefing will in fact take place. Let's clarify this.
It would appear that the discussions between the President of the Republic and the SG of the ANC and the Deputy SG of the ANC was that possibly they may have spoken about the issue of 10 o'clock. Remember, the caucus of the ANC, I think, has been convened to meet at around 11. So I think the thinking was that after the President would have addressed the media briefing or the nation, then the caucus will now meet knowing exactly what is the thinking of the President, what is the response of the President. So to me, it appears perhaps confusion may have arisen from that point of view. But what will happen eventually is that there will be some kind of communication from the presidency and the President himself as to how he received the decision to recall him by his party.
Definitely. Let's wrap it up there. That was our presidential correspondent, Mzwandile Mbeja. Of course, it's a waiting game. We're going to have to wait until 10 a.m. this morning to see what is going to transpire. Popo Molefe also spoke to SABC News earlier on why it has taken so long for the ANC to recall the president.
Well, firstly, the man is fighting for his survival. He knows he's got many criminal charges, which are to be preferred against him. Of course, he had said that he wants his day in court, but we know that he never means what he says. But the second thing is that in 2007 and subsequently in 2012, when the National Executive Committee of the ANC was elected in Parliament, they systematically ensured that a lot of people in that executive committee are cronies, and many of them got compromised in the rampant corruption that has been taking place in the country. So all of them, well, let me not say all of them, quite a significant number of them, therefore know that if the dawn of that group goes down, all of them would follow. So they are fighting to stay in office. Of course, as Sipho has correctly pointed out, they have disabled the very important institutions of law enforcement, which ensure the rule of law in the country. And they know that with those institutions being weak, they can stay forever in office and continue this corruption.
Yeah, I mean, both of you have been in governmental positions. You were premier. You've been there too in the capacity of Labour. Is it that difficult to get rid of a member of your party, of the ANC, that is clearly breaking the Constitution, even though the ANC hasn't come out and said that clearly? You know, there were no reasons given yesterday, but it appears from the outset, from the outside, that it is a very difficult thing to do. Is it? Or is it just for this particular man?
I think it's indecisiveness. It is for this particular man. I think they've created a Frankenstein in the leadership of the organization. We have served with President Nelson Mandela. We disagreed with him on many occasions in that NEC. But he was a man of conscience and goodwill. He listened to the rational arguments presented and never insisted on having his way and nothing else. But the kind of leadership we have had since 2007 is a very strange leadership that is alien to the traditions of our movement and the democratic system that we set up in 1993 through the interim constitution and the final constitution in 1994. So I think it's this indecisiveness and the fact that many of the people who are supposed to be making decisions to remove him were compromised. I mean, well, somebody said I mustn't talk about trust. I was going to give you an example of what happens when you go to Parliament talking about corruption. You have the MPs actually fighting you for fighting corruption, you know.
Well,
so that's the problem we've got.
Going back to one of our lead stories this hour, the Hawks are reported to have made 2 arrests during the current raid at the Gupta residence in Saxonwold. For the latest on the breaking story, we are now joined on the line by Hawks spokesperson Hangwani Mudlaudzi. A very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us. Firstly, can you confirm that there have been arrests made at the Gupta compound, and what other details surrounding that can you give us at this point in time?
Good morning, and thank you for giving us this opportunity. Look, these are just speculations. You know, we did communicate in the morning that all this, what is happening today, will be communicated at a later stage. We are still having these operations that are taking place in Gauteng, and as such, once we are done, a proper and official communique will then be disseminated to everyone so that they can be able to know what actually transpired today.
Now, you just said that at the moment it's still speculation. We have heard from our SABC reporter on the ground, Crisaldo Lewis, who has cited a very high source saying that 2 arrests have in fact been made, and one of them includes a Gupta brother. Can you confirm that?
That is what we are saying. I've been saying that as soon as we get information from the team leader, we will be able to communicate if there are any arrests that have been made. But for now, we're still waiting for him and his team to give us a proper and an official report. So we cannot confirm on issues that we are not aware of. And as such, hence we are saying that people just need to be patient. We will, of course, be able to communicate this. We know that there is that anxiety within the public, and of course we have a responsibility to make sure that we communicate what is right. So once we get that information, we will definitely make sure that you are aware of it.
Apart from the arrests, what more details can the Hawks tell us about the actual raid?
Well, it's not a raid, per se, because the raid talks about, search and seizures and all those kind of things. We are the first leg of the state of capture, investigations. Of course, one of the things that we can confirm is that we are expecting arrests. So those arrests can only be confirmed once we have received a report from the team leader. Hence, I'm requesting that we should not even get into that detail as who has been arrested so far and all those kind of things. So we will, of course, in terms of our communication, give you all the details and as and when, if there are arrests, when are the people going to appear and where.
Now, moving away from the Gupta compound, there are also reports of other arrests that are supposed to take place, not only in Johannesburg, possibly in Gauteng or other compounds elsewhere. Can you give us more details and confirmations on that?
Well, that is one of the things that makes it very difficult for me, because remember, if I want to give you all the details, it means that I'm also compromising my investigation. So let's wait. We will be able to tell you what's happening. But for now, this is a very, very sensitive issue that we are dealing with. And it's very, very difficult for me as well not to ventilate as to what was going on. But the mere fact of the fact that you are seeing something, it also shows interest. So that is why we're saying, as and when we are comfortable with what we receive from the team, we will communicate that.
Thank you very much for giving us an update there, Hawks spokesperson Hangwani Mudlaudzi, being very evasive as to many details surrounding the supposed arrest, not confirming anything at this point in time. We're going to have to wait for that official statement coming from the Hawks this morning. Moving on to some other news, the High Court is expected to rule on the City of Cape Town Mayor Patricia de Lille's application to have a secret ballot during a vote of no confidence against her during a council meeting tomorrow. Of course, this follows allegations of corruption and mismanagement levelled against de Lille by the DA. Her legal representative, Senior Advocate Dalim Mpofu, has argued that it is crucial for the High Court in Cape Town to rule in favour of a secret ballot. Mpofu has asked the court to issue an order compelling the DA to instruct its caucus members in the city to use a secret ballot during a vote of no confidence. Mpofu says only a secret ballot can protect councillors against intimidation. This morning, we have our question of the day here on SABC Newsroom. We're asking you, what do you expect from the ANC's midday presser? Well, that's just with regards to the statements that are being released from the ANC throughout the course of the ANC transition government. Please send us your comments on @SABC Newsroom. And in fact, it is, do you think that President Jacob Zuma is going to respond to the recall? That is the actual question. We will have a look at tweets after the break.
Our stories.
How do I begin?
Our lives. When all seems to fail, we will raise our voices a bit louder for our justice.
I went into absolute shock. My whole body was shaky. I couldn't hold a phone, but there he was. I couldn't believe the nonchalance that they were still in the area 2 weeks later.
And in times when the justice system is not able to help us with our individual battles,
I'm willing to do anything. What are you doing? Nothing. Feeling sorry for yourself? No, it's not an option.
These are our stories on Cutting Edge Channel 404.
When life takes a different turn.
If I didn't eat the speak, he was going to evict me.
Your will to persevere is ignited.
I'm not a professional speaker, but I'll try my best to give you a word of inspiration.
He was just trying to provide for his family.
If you can't accept it, change it. If you cannot change it, accept it.
And a new story begins.
Made a resolve to myself. I'm learning something new.
Upilong, every Friday at 5:30. Be part of the life-changing journey.
Welcome back to SABC Newsroom. Let's try that again. Of course, the question of the day there is around President Jacob Zuma. Do you think that President Jacob Zuma will resign? Send us your comments on @SABC Newsroom. Let's have a look at some of the tweets that have already come through this morning. The first one coming in is Lucas. He won't go down alone. That's the reason why he won't resign and is prepared to go through a vote of no confidence. Alpha says they must just clean up the mess they caused and ship out in 2019. We can't trust the self-servicing ANC with our future. Let's have a look now at our poll of the day that we have been running this morning on SABC Newsroom. Again, do you think that President Jacob Zuma will resign? We've just seen just over 700 votes coming in. 42% of you are saying yes. 58% of our participants on the poll this morning are still saying no. Let's have a look at some of the tweets that have been coming in there. Baby Boss on Twitter says, "Dear SABC Newsroom, you should have put an option of not sure, because a lot of us are not sure if Zuma will resign. The man is full of tricks." And Lucas again says he won't go down alone, and that's the reason why he won't resign and is prepared to go through a vote of no confidence. Let's have a look at one of our top stories as our 2 arrests have been made as the Hawks raid the Gupta residence in Saxonwold. We also know that President Jacob Zuma is expected to respond to the ANC's decision to recall him this morning. Parliament's multi-party chief whips and are meeting to discuss EFF's motion of no confidence in the president. Over 20,000 people flee their homes in Congo as ethnic violence intensifies. Well, over 20,000 people have fled Congo to Uganda last week following a surge of ethnic violence in the northeast, raising the total number of arrivals to about 34,000 since the start of the year. This is according to the UN Refugee Agency, and they said this on Tuesday. At least 30 people have been killed in fighting between Hema herders and Lendu farmers in the province of Ituri this month, echoing clashes that killed thousands of Hema and Lendu during a civil war that ended in 2003. Over 120,000 Congolese fled to neighboring countries last year after President Joseph Kabila refused to step down at the end of his mandate in December of 2016. His decision sparked a wave of unrest, raising fears that the mineral-rich Central African country was slipping back into civil war. Now, staying with news abroad, Ethiopia released a senior opposition leader from prison on Tuesday and dropped all charges against him, a day after demonstrators blocked roads and staged rallies in several towns to protest against his incarceration. Or rather his incarceration. Well, Bekele Gurba, Secretary General of the Oromo Federalist Congress, or the OFC, was arrested in December of 2015 after mass protests broke out in the Oromia region after accusations that farmers were being forced to sell land with scant compensation. He had been held initially on terrorism charges, which were later reduced to charges of incitement to violence. Well, 3 people died and 4 are missing after a migrant boat carrying 8 people capsized on Tuesday in a river that flows between Turkey and Greece. This is according to a spokeswoman for Turkey's disaster and emergency organization. The 8th refugee had made it into Greece. Well, the boat was traveling along the Maritsa River in Turkey's northwestern province of Edirne when it capsized early on Tuesday, the first aid organization said. Well, nearby residents heard scams and informed the locals. Searchers recovered 3 bodies, AFD had said, adding that 2 of them were children, one around 12 years old and the other around 4 years old. The causes of the death have not been as yet determined. Some international news. Israeli police have recommended that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu be charged for alleged corruption, but he says he's innocent and has no intention of resigning. Netanyahu was addressing the nation as the news broke that he would face charges of bribery, fraud and breach of public trust over expensive gifts from wealthy businessmen. Netanyahu's lawyers says that gifts were simply tokens of friendship with no attachments. A decision on whether to press formal charges against him now rests with the Attorney General's office, which is expected to take place in a couple of weeks or months on how to decide to proceed. Well, U.S. President Donald Trump convened a group of local sheriffs to the White House on Tuesday for talks on how to prosecute a campaign against drug use and the influx of drugs across the nation's borders. The president linked the anti-drug campaign to his immigration policy. He said the construction of a wall on the southern border, the ending of chain migration immigration policies, and the cancellation of visa lotteries would contribute to a law and order approach to curbing drug use.
My administration stands proudly with America's sheriffs, deputies, and law enforcement officers, and we stand also 100% with strong law and order. We want you to just keep doing your job as well as you're doing it. We've helped you a lot with military equipment and other things, but we just want you to keep going just the way you have been. You've been fantastic. We're participating with local law enforcement through the Project Safe Neighborhoods. We're increasing prosecutions of federal gun crimes. We're taking the fight to the drug dealers and drug pushers, which frankly I think is the #1 way we're going to stop drugs. We can form all the blue ribbon committees in the world, but the way you're going to stop it is you folks with strong, really law and order when it comes to the drug and the drug pushers, the drug dealers. That's the way it's going to stop. It's going to really the #1 way. I think you probably all agree with that, and you've really done, especially some of you have really done a job. We're asking Congress to support our immigration policy that keeps terrorists, drug dealers, criminals, and gang members out of our country. We want them out. We don't want them in. And right now we're working on DACA, we're working on immigration bills, and we're making them tough so you people can enforce the laws, sometimes tough because of the laws you have to enforce. That's why we're asking the senators to support legislation that contains the 3 vital elements of a safe immigration system. So we're right now in the Senate, we're in Congress all together, and we'll see what happens with DACA. But we want securing the border and a wall, ending chain migration, and canceling the visa lottery. I think you all agree. Anybody in favor of the lottery, where you pick it out and you say, good, we have a new United States citizen? Doesn't work. And they're not giving us their finest, that we can tell you. In everything we do, we're listening to law enforcement, and we're putting the safety and security of American people first. Again, thank you all for being here. I look forward to hearing from all of you. We're going to have a nice meeting, and we're going to discuss some of the things that we've been discussing. We've made a lot of progress, and we'll keep it going. But a very big thing is going to be drugs and the way the drugs pour into our country. We're stopping them, I guess, as much as they can be stopped right now, but the laws are being stiffened, and you're going to be able to do even more of a job. So we appreciate you being here. Thank you very much.
Let's have a look now at our picture of the day. This one comes in from Cape Town. At Cape Town, we waited for this hashtag rain from at Welsh Pixie, taken with Cameron Nicken over Gordon's Bay. Of course, we've been so wrapped up in what's been happening with the transitioning government that Cape Town possibly is experiencing some rain. So hopefully this week we should see some more showers of rain over Cape Town. The comment of day, this one comes in from Barney Mtoboti. South Africa is, for all intensive purposes, leaderless. The old is dying, the new is struggling to be born, nobody's telling, and the country is in the dark. Rumours are having a field day. Hashtag Zuma recall. Well, we're going to have to be waiting up until that supposed 10 a.m. announcement. Everybody's waiting in bated breath. No official confirmation, so definitely befitting for this morning and what we can expect. For more on what is happening in Parliament today, we are joined by SABC's parliamentary reporter Lucanio Alata in Cape Town. Very good morning to you, Lucanio. Essentially, why is everything on hold this morning? Of course, we also expected the chief whips to meet and the ANC's parliamentary caucus.
Good morning, Shante. Your guess is as good as ours in essence as to why exactly everything has either been postponed or is currently on hold. My suggestion, or at least my thinking, is the fact that we are awaiting some kind of briefing to come from the President of the Republic, Mr. Jacob Zuma. What we understand is that the Minister of Finance, Malusi Gigaba, last night said that there will be a briefing at around 10 o'clock this morning. He was obviously confirming a statement that was made much earlier on in the day yesterday by the Secretary General of the ANC, Mr. Ace Magashule, who had intimated that President Jacob Zuma is expected to respond today to the NEC's decision, of course, to recall him. So there was a chief whips meeting that was set down for 8 o'clock this morning. That has now been moved to 2 o'clock this afternoon. The ANC caucus had called a special caucus meeting this morning at 10 o'clock. That has now been delayed by an hour, so that we expect it to only start at about 11 o'clock. So up until 10 o'clock, let me put it this way, then we will see whether or not President Jacob Zuma will indeed make a statement. We will know, how the day or the rest of the day is likely to pan out. But yes, everything that was supposed to have taken place in Parliament this morning has all been shifted, and we once again find ourselves in that position where we are waiting. Just what we're waiting for, we don't know at this time. Shante?
Definitely. We're all waiting here in Johannesburg too. Essentially, what is likely to happen? It is speculative, but what is likely to happen if the president does not budge or possibly give out a message of accepting the recall?
Shante, if the president doesn't accept the NEC's decision to recall him, everything then moves to Parliament. What we know is that already the EFF has a motion that is waiting to be debated inside the National Assembly, and that motion is a motion of no confidence in the president. Now, should that be successful, it would essentially mean that the president, the deputy president, the entire cabinet, including deputy ministers, will all have to resign. In a extreme case like that, if I can refer to it like that, the Speaker, Ubaleka will then become acting president. And then she will have about 30 days in which to then convene a sitting of the National Assembly to then elect a new president, who will then obviously then elect his own cabinet, or at least appoint his own cabinet. So that is the likelihood. If the president does not accept the decision to recall him, it will come back to Parliament. There will be a motion of no confidence. Now, the political dilemma in a case like that, Shante, comes in as to whether or not the ANC will accept the motion by the EFF, or whether or not they will try to negotiate with the EFF to say, if you withdraw your motion of no confidence, we will then table our motion. Because what we understand from the ANC at this time is that they would be very unwilling to vote in favor of a motion of no confidence that was brought by an opposition party, whether that be the EFF or the Democratic Alliance. So in that case as well, we wait and see how the president responds, and his response will then determine what happens next. Shante?
Definitely. Just before we wrap it up, what are the chances of the ANC siding with opposition parties to oust their own employee if it comes to that push?
Very little. I don't know if the ANC will have a choice otherwise, but the chances of them voting with the EFF or even with the Democratic Alliance with this motion of no confidence that's already in front of the National Assembly, I don't know if the ANC would want that, because you see, that would be politically, the EFF would mean that they can claim the moral high ground. They can say that we helped remove the president of the ANC. Look what a terrible president he was, that they needed us to come and remove him. So politically, the ANC would not want to be in that position. So what they would do, I suspect, is that they would try and negotiate with the EFF to say, if you guys withdraw your motion, we will then table our motion, and then it must be a motion by the ANC to remove an ANC president. I don't think the ANC would take very kindly to a motion by any of the opposition parties to remove President Jacob Zuma. Shante?
Definitely. Thank you very much, SABC parliamentary reporter Lukano Alata, taking us through now what seems to also be a move from the ANC caucus, which was supposed to take place. Of course, Kinamak Mate is standing by, leading us into our sports.
Yes, Shante, thank you very much. Very heady days we're dealing with right now with all the news, like everybody's on tenterhooks. But you know what? One thing we're not on tenterhooks about is the Proteas and whether they're actually going to level the series. They've just lost that match against India. Listen, 73-run loss to India, and we really want to know what's happening with them, and we want to find out what went wrong with the Proteas. Right, speaking of which, Rohit Sharma scored 115 from 126 deliveries to guide India to a comprehensive 73-run win over South Africa. This in the 5th ODI of 6 played at St. George's Park in Port Elizabeth. The win sees the touring side clinch the 6-match ODI series 4-1 with a game to spare. Joseph Mohale reports.
Having successfully chased at the Wanderers in the 4th ODI between the two teams, Eden Makram elected to field first after winning the toss. However, it was India who got off to a promising start, racing to 43 runs for no loss after 7 overs, Shikhar Dhawan being the aggressor, contributing 30 from 21 deliveries. 2 balls later, South Africa made a breakthrough. Dhawan gone after skying Kagiso Rabada's delivery to deep square leg. Joined by his keeper Virat Kohli at the crease, Rohit Sharma, who has struggled with the bat throughout the ODI series, brought up his 50. The pair looked unbeatable going on to bring up their 100-run partnership from 108 balls, which was their 13th in one-day internationals. That was shortly followed by Virat Kohli's run out.
Oh, it's a direct hit. That's brilliant. Dumini. He's had the presence of mind to take aim, but underarm at the stumps. So
India were their worst enemies. Anjike Rahan, who came in at number 4, didn't last long, also losing his wicket with a run out. Tabrai's Shamsi dropped Sharma on 97, and the men whose selection have been questioned made the most of that, registering his second ODI century against South Africa. The latter's innings proved instrumental in guiding India to a defendable total of 274 for the loss of 7 wickets at the end of their 50 overs. Beside the opener Hashim Amla, who scored 71 from 92 balls, the South Africans never really got going in their reply. They were bowled out for 201, India claiming victory by 73 runs. Joseph Mohali, SABC News.
Right, now if you've just joined us, you are watching Newsroom, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Nedbank Cup last 32. Some matches on tonight. I've got a little fixture list to show you exactly what's happening. It's a bit of a tall order, I tell you, for Platinum Stars. They're up against Baroka FC. You remember Baroka FC are former log leaders, hey? They were log leaders at Platinum Stars, sitting bottom of the logs, which just been sold. At 3:30 p.m. this afternoon is where we're going to have a very interesting match between Richards Bay and Bloem Young Tigers at the Umhlatuze Sports Complex in Richards Bay, of course. Then Super Eagles, they play Free State Stars at Goble Park. Bafokeng Stadium is where Platinum Stars and Baroka will be locking horns to see who's going to make it into the last 16. And of course, Stellenbosch, they play Highlands Park at Athlone Stadium. That's, I'd say, a Western Cape derby, that one. 7:30 kickoff for that match. Now we'll stay with footballing news, and this time we'll move a little further afield. We've moved to Europe, where Ike Gundogan dazzled with 2 goals in Manchester City's 4-0 romp at FC Basel to leave the Premier League leaders on the verge of Champions League quarter-finals. And Tottenham Hotspur recovered from conceding twice in the opening 9 minutes to secure a draw away to Juventus in the first leg of the Champions League last 16. Let's have a look at the highlights.
Not even a wall, really, just one man, and it is through. Tottenham didn't line up the defence properly for a free kick, and Juve are ahead in the opening couple of minutes. A disastrous start for Tottenham Hotspur. And Sukic, they're a yard quicker than... Ooh, it's a risky challenge in there, Davis. And the referee, and this is Higuain for 2-0, Juventus right from the start. Oh, the goalkeeper got a hand to it, couldn't keep it out. Juventus lead against Tottenham Hotspur by 2 goals to 0 in the opening 10 minutes. As Maxi Allegri will insist all his players do. Here's Dele Alli for Spurs. Kane, the flag has stayed down around Buffon. Harry Kane! Tottenham back in the tie. Mella stands to the left. It's going to be Eriksson, who went low and scores. What a comeback by Tottenham Hotspur. Eriksson has been absolutely superb. They were 2-0 down after 9 minutes.
In by De Bruyne, and the head is in from Gundogan. As simple as that. De Bruyne looking for Sterling. Aguero is waiting, comes through to Bernardo Silva, and it's in for 2-0. Here with Barca, won 5-0. Aguero. Brilliant! The goalkeeper didn't even move. Aguero's found Gundogan. Might take it on, he does, and scores again. And Manchester City have their 4th goal, and it's Basel 0, Manchester City 4.
And 21-year-old South African swimmer Brent Zudoki recently qualified and was subsequently selected to compete at the 2018 Commonwealth Games on Australia's Gold Coast. He tore 80% of his ligaments in his ankle while wakeboarding just 3 months before the trials and was in a cast for 6 weeks. We caught up with Brent to find out more about his road to recovery as well as his preparation for the Commonwealth Games, which are set to take place from the 4th to the 15th of April.
Just 5 months after his injury, Brent Sudoki is doing everything in his power to make up for lost time in his training. He's even incorporating cross-training to help speed up the process.
I tried to tell myself, listen, it's not bad, you can do this. But then going through the whole process and realizing, listen, like, I've got to make sure my ankle heals properly, because if it doesn't, then it's going to come back and bite me. And obviously I pushed the limits, trying to get out of my cast and get the rehab done as fast as possible. And I'm still struggling today, you know, still got to do a bit of the rehab. We're not back to 100% in terms of my leg strength. So we're still working on those things now.
His mother, Lynn Sudoki, believes it's his self-confidence and determination that's gotten him where he is today.
He had a great belief in himself. So I think that that's what made him into the kind of swimmer that he is. You know, he always knew, I can do this. Never ever doubted himself. He always had that sort of confidence in himself.
It's what he's always wanted since he was a child. He was one of those kids like, oh, I want to be an astronaut. No, he was like, I'm going to be an Olympic swimmer. And that's always been his goal. And then for the past couple of years, it's just been a lot more serious because of the results that he's got from all his training.
In 2016, as an up-and-coming swimmer, Sudoki competed in the 25 meters FINA World Swimming Championships and in the FINA World Aquatics Championships in 2017. He's hoping that the Commonwealth Games will be his launch pad for the 2020 Tokyo Olympics.
For me, I feel like this Games coming now in April is a good stepping stone for me to gain more experience racing against those guys that I might meet at the Olympics.
With only 49 days left until the Commonwealth Games begin, the next few weeks will consist of nothing more but intense training for Brent. Kamhelo Ntwanambi, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Go Brent. We all know when Chad Leclerc and Cameron van den Berg retire, we will not have a swimming team. So wishing all the best for this young Sudoki to do well in the pool. That's where we'll leave it for now. We'll be back shortly. You are watching Newsroom.
Corruption both in the public and the private sectors needs to be combated.
Where there are clear cases of wrong that has been done, that must commence immediately.
Something is being done about corruption in our country.
Currency, even although it's strengthened dramatically after the ANC's recent elective conference, could conceivably go stronger yet.
He had a soul that would not be for sale.
Stay tuned to Your World for your final news roundup, Monday to Sunday at 21:30.
when life takes a different turn.
If I didn't eat the speak, he was going to evict me.
Your will to persevere is ignited.
I'm not a professional speaker, but I'll try my best to give you a word of inspiration.
He was just trying to provide for his family.
If you can't accept it, change it. If you cannot change it, accept it.
And a new story begins.
Made a resolve to myself. I'm learning something new.
Upilong, every Friday at 5:30. Be part of the life-changing journey.
Sports Live, Saturday and Sundays at 8:30 p.m.
Two arrests have been made. I do understand at this point that one is a Gupta family member.
While the president is expected to respond to the recall, Parliament's chief whip meets to discuss EFF's motion of no confidence. The High Court is today expected to rule on Patricia de Lille's application to have a secret ballot during a vote of no confidence against her during a council meeting tomorrow.
Big appeal and given. It's game, set and match.
The Proteas put in another awful display of indifferent cricket and get swept aside by India in the 5th ODI, losing the match by 73 runs and the series with it.
Well, history has been achieved in Port Elizabeth, winning by 73 runs.
Hello and welcome to Newsroom. I'm Shante Yankees coming to you live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg. A lot coming up between now and 12 p.m, including the latest from the ANC government's transition, your views, as well as all the news from our continent, of course. So standing by with all your sporting highlights at Kendall Matumate. Very good morning to you. A very happy Wednesday, a very good Valentine's Day. She has been such a hectic morning, Kendall.
Yeah, it is now. Happy Valentine's Day to you too. And I see you like you're all dressed up in the right gear.
We try.
Yeah, no, it looks great. Yeah, I've got a lot to cover, and it's all about the Proteas and how badly they've been doing in this ODI series against India. But all this and more a little later in the Sports Bulletin.
The lead story this hour, one of the Gupta brothers and a business associate are understood to have been arrested by the Hawks. The arrests come during a raid by the Hawks at the Gupta compound in Saxonwold earlier this morning. The raid is believed to be part of a larger probe into alleged state capture.
These are just speculations. You know, we did communicate in the morning that all this, what is happening today will be communicated at a later stage. We are still having these operations that are taking place in Gauteng. And as such, once we are done, proper and official communique will then be disseminated to everyone so that they can be able to know what actually transpired today.
Now, you just said that at the moment it's still speculation. We have heard from our SABC reporter on the ground, Crisalda Lewis, who has cited a very high source saying that 2 arrests have in fact been made, and one of them includes a Gupta brother. Can you confirm that?
That is what we are saying, I've been saying that as soon as we get information from the team leader, we will be able to communicate if there are any arrests that have been made. But for now, we're still waiting for him and his team to give us a proper and an official report. So we cannot confirm on issues that we are not aware of, and as such, hence we are saying that people just need to be patient. We will, of course, be able to communicate this. We know that there is that anxiety within the public, and of course we have a responsibility to make sure that we communicate what is right. So once we get that information, we will definitely make sure that you are aware of it.
Apart from the arrests, what more details can the Hawks tell us about the actual raid?
Well, it's not a raid, per se, because the raid talks about, search and seizures and all those kind of things. We are the first leg of the state of capture, investigations. Of course, one of the things that we can confirm is that we are expecting arrests. So those arrests can only be confirmed once we have received a report from the team leader. Hence, I'm requesting that we should not even get into that detail as who has been arrested so far and all those kind of things. So we will, of course, in terms of our communication, give you all the details and as and when, if there are arrests, when are the people going to appear and where.
Now, moving away from the Gupta compound, there are also reports of other arrests that are supposed to take place, not only in Johannesburg, possibly in Gauteng or other compounds elsewhere. Can you give us more details and confirmations on that?
Well, that is one of the things that makes it very difficult for me, because remember, if I want to give you all the details, it means that I'm also compromising my investigation. So let's wait. We will be able to tell you what's happening. But for now, this is a very, very sensitive issue that we are dealing with. And it's very, very difficult for me as well not to ventilate as to what was going on. But the mere fact of the fact that you are seeing something, it also shows interest. So that is why we're saying, as and when we are comfortable with what we receive from the team.
President Jacob Zuma's office has denied reports that he was due to make an official announcement at 10 a.m. this morning. This as throngs of journalists gathered outside the union buildings waiting for the announcement from the president. For the latest on the story, we now cross live to our presidential correspondent, Mzwandile Mbeje, who is at the union buildings this morning. Very good morning to Mzwandile. Of course, there seems to be some sort of chaos and confusion. What essentially is the latest from the union buildings? Is a meeting going to take place?
What we can confirm to you is that at 10 o'clock today, there is no media briefing. But what we do know again is that sometime today, there will be some kind of communication from the highest office with regards to the recall that the ANC has forwarded to him. Earlier, I did indicate that the presidency had issued a statement saying nothing formal had been communicated to public with regards to 10 o'clock. It would appear that perhaps there may have been issues with internal processes and then it got leaked out to the media. But of course, as the day progresses, because there are several processes that need to kick in, so there will be some kind of communication later today, particularly if you take into account the fact that the ANC caucus has to meet, because that caucus needs to be able to give direction to its members as to what to do next. And they can only do that once they know what the president would have said. Remember, he is expected to accede to the demand, or rather to the recall that has been issued by his party. But of course, in the event that doesn't happen, then the caucus will have to then start the proceedings. But I would think, as a long-standing member of the ANC, he will probably do what the party has asked of him to do.
Definitely. Well, it just seems as though it is a waiting game. We'll leave it there. Presidential correspondent Mzwandile Mbeje, of course, confirming not necessarily that a media briefing is going to be taking place at 10 a.m. as anticipated via reports this morning. Let's have a look now at some other news. For the latest on the story, we also cross over to our reporter, Griselda Lewis. Of course, this is with regards to another lead story this morning and the raid of the Gupta compound. Very good morning to you. Any updates from your side, Griselda? We spoke to the spokesperson, Hangwani Mudlaudzi. He was very evasive about his answers and questions and not confirming anything from the Hawks side.
Well, Shante, we can give you breaking news now. We understand from the Hawks, from an official statement that has just been released now, 3 people have now been arrested. You remember a bit earlier on, 2 had been arrested here at the Gupta compound behind me. One is a Gupta family member and the other is a business associate. We understand that the 3rd person who's been arrested was arrested somewhere in Johannesburg. If I can read from that statement that's just been released by the Hawks, it says the Hawks Serious Corruption Crime Unit is currently conducting ongoing investigations at various addresses in Gauteng, including at a residential premises in Saxonwold near Johannesburg. Well, that's right here behind me where the police and the Hawks have been. And it says the operation is in respect of the Vrede Farm investigations. You'd recall, of course, the Vrede Farm was the investigations that were conducted, including the Public Protector's report, did indicate that millions had been channeled to the Gupta family and not to the intended cause of that farm itself. And it does say that so far 3 people have been arrested.
Oh, unfortunately, technology letting us down there. The signal is transmitted. We will be trying to get Griselda Lewis back on the line, or at least via phone line or live, just to give us that detail. Griselda, if you can hear me, can you please take us through the last bit of the statement that you were reading just before we got cut off air?
The state capture report, that's the latest information that we're getting from the Hawks at this stage.
Griselda, if you can, we lost you for the past 30 seconds as you were giving us the last bit of information that you were reading from that official statement. If you could please give that to us once again. Very, very crucial information coming to us live from the ground. Of course, unfortunately not being able to contact Griselda. We will try get Griselda Lewis back on the line to give us all those details surrounding what has now been a 3rd arrest, and we were giving you detail and contingent that had been released from the Hawks in an official statement. Moving on to some other news stories, specifically around the ANC and the transition of government thereof. ANC National Spokesperson Pule Mabe earlier spoke to SABC News on a number of reasons why President Jacob Zuma has been recalled.
A recall of a sitting president of the republic is one form of dealing with that kind of a transition.
So in a nutshell, the only reason that's been given by the ANC that President Jacob Zuma is being recalled is purely for transitional purposes, nothing else.
Well, I'm sure that you will appreciate that when the National Executive Committee sit to deliberate on this and many other issues, it will have applied its mind to numerous other details. You know, and in this instance, the feeling was that, look, we're going into elections in 2019. It is important that we prepare our machinery so that our structures are geared for those processes.
Yeah.
So we felt that it might be necessary that you begin with that process much earlier.
Pule, there's also reports circulating, and especially if you're giving the reason as transitional purposes behind the recall of President Jacob Zuma. There are absolute firm reports doing the round that President Jacob Zuma may reach out to the Constitutional Court for this recall. Is this something that you can confirm to us? I mean, is this in the pipeline? Have you heard anything?
Well, I must confirm that the ANC, when our continuous interactions with President Zuma, who has been president of the ANC, who is a loyal and disciplined cadre of the movement, have been quite cordial. I mean, relations are not strained. So we firmly believe that President Zuma remains a disciplined member of the ANC and would do what is best for a cadre of the movement to be able to allow the National Executive Committee to process his decisions, because he led the ANC. There were times when he took the collective he led had taken decisions, and he had to make sure that he act to implement those. I mean, I had an opportunity of serving with him in the previous collective, and I can assure you of the discipline of President Zuma. And I don't think that we should be second-guessing him. You know, I think we should allow him that space to be able to brief the nation and I can assure you that as he does that, he will also make sure that the interest of the people of South Africa and that of the ANC is placed first. Because President Zuma was part of the National Liberation Project and understand why we must move this country forward.
Let me just quickly, there's one or two more questions I need to ask you. This deadline, because yesterday, Ace Magashule said there is no deadline. The president's got as long as he wants to. But before that, it was said that there's a 48-hour deadline, which of course ends today. Is there or isn't there a deadline?
Well, you see, Leanne, in the newsroom, a deadline might mean different things.
No. 48 hours is 48 hours.
Yes, I'm actually going there.
Okay,
I'm saying a deadline might mean different things.
Yeah.
One, the fact that the Secretary General of the ANC had already made it clear that the National Executive Committee, in arriving at this decision, had said it would prefer that President Ramaphosa delivers the State of the Nation's address, and also said that it would prefer that the State of the Nation's address is delivered before the budget speech. You will know that one thing like the budget speech is quite prescriptive by law. It has got to happen before the 1st of March so that we can begin with our program to deliver services to the masses of our people and all of that.
Okay, so the deadline?
So I'm just saying, if you look at the fact that you need to have SONA much
so today is the deadline, is what you're saying. Today is the deadline. President Jacob Zuma has to respond today.
He has already given that undertaking to the officials.
So he's given that undertaking.
Yes.
And just finally, SONA, is it going to happen? Are we going to have a State of the Nation address? I mean, constitutionally, do we really have to have one?
Yes, well, we are going to have a State of the Nation's address. And that State of the Nation's address, in terms of what the ANC has already placed on record, is that it must be addressed by President Ramaphosa, who has got to ascend as the President of the Republic.
Let's cross back to that developing story throughout the course of the morning, of course, surrounding the Gupta raids on their compounds by the Hawks this morning. Our reporter, Griselda Lewis, is on the ground giving us a minute-by-minute, blow-to-blow updates. A very good morning to you once again, Griselda. If technology is going to stay on our side, can you please take us through specifically the last bits of details with regards to the third arrest that you had confirmed for us earlier on?
Well, that's right, Shante. We do apologize for the break in transmission there. We're struggling to get network with all these palatial homes here in Saxonwold. But we can confirm at this stage that now a third person has been arrested. The official communication that we received from the Hawks is that so far 3 people have been arrested and 2 other suspects are expected to hand themselves over to the Hawks. The Hawks say that operations are still ongoing and further details will be made available at a later stage. Now recall, 2 had been arrested here at the Gupta family home here in Saxonwold. 1 is a Gupta family member and the other is a business associate. We understand the third person who was arrested somewhere in Johannesburg. We're not sure of the exact details at this point, but official confirmation from the Hawks there that a third person has now been arrested, and them saying that 2 other suspects are expected to hand themselves over. Official confirmation from the Hawks as well that this is in respect of the Proteas farm investigations, and we understand that some of the other arrests and those who are expected to hand themselves over relate to a leg of the state capture investigation that you know has been underway by the Hawks. Much quieter here at the Saxonwold home of the Guptas at this stage. Very unclear about whether there were any other Gupta family members inside this compound when the Hawks pounced on it this morning. But all indications, Shante, at this point is that the information that I received is that the Hawks were eyeing 13 other suspects relating to the Proteas farm investigation, as well as 2 other suspects relating to the state capture, a leg of the state capture investigation. So definitely at this stage, we do expect more arrests to be made in these matters. We're expecting further communication from the Hawks at a later stage, because we do understand that this is not the only residence that is being raided. There's some speculation at this point that there are some raids taking place in Bedford View. We cannot confirm that at this stage. Bedford View, for those who don't know, is here in Johannesburg. But the previous statement by the Hawks also did indicate that several raids are being conducted. Now, let me just clarify on the issue of raids there, Shante. When I did speak to the Hawk spokesperson a bit earlier on, he did indicate that these were not per se raids, but direct arrests. So I guess that the Hawks do believe at this point that they are ready to make these arrests and that their investigations are at a very sensitive stage at this point, because they would not have made those arrests in the first place. So we are expecting more arrests in this matter. So far, a third person has now been arrested and 2 other suspects are expected to hand themselves over.
Definitely. Thank you very much for giving us those details there live from the ground in Saxonwold. Our reporter for SABC News, Griselda Lewis. For more reaction on this, as well as the ANC transition that we've seen and the chaotic past couple of days, specifically in politics, we are joined from our C Point studios by Sanusha Naidu, a political analyst and director at Fahamu. Very good morning to Sanusha. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Firstly, before we talk about what's happening within the ANC and the chaos, whether there's a media briefing, whether President Jacob Zuma will resign or not, let's talk about the Hawks raids that we've seen. This is now the second raid that we've seen in just a number of days or weeks, and of course under the newly elected ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Good morning, Shanti. I think it's absolutely incredible what we're actually witnessing in terms of the unfolding of events with regard to the raid this morning on the Gupta's compound in Saxonwold. Is it orchestrated? Is it all set down in a kind of a scene that has been scripted? I'm not sure. I think it's quite coincidental, but coincidental it also means that it could have been scripted in a manner in which the Hawks had decided that they're going to go ahead with their investigation parallel to what's happening in the broader political context of the NEC meeting, the recall decision by the ANC NEC, and of course waiting for President Zuma's press briefing, which seems to be an uncertainty at this point in time, because there's uncertainty and confusion coming out of the presidency around whether there is a press briefing or not. And then, of course, waiting for Parliament in respect of the caucus meeting that is scheduled for 11 a.m. and, of course, the meeting of the chiefs whip of the chief whips at 2 p.m. So it all seems to be coming to a head, and I think, you know, it's almost like watching one of these movies that we go and see, where we try to relax our minds away from all these conspiracies and supremacies, and et cetera, and we're seeing this unfold. The uncertainty of all of this is that everything is fluid now. The challenge we have is that we're having a government without a government. There is a president that's not a president, in a sense that he's not leading. A cabinet meeting has been postponed for today. So there's no governance taking place in terms of the running of the country.
Sanusha, let's talk business of the day. What is the likelihood of President Jacob Zuma actually resigning? We've seen a very defiant, a very strong and somewhat stubborn character being shown of President Jacob Zuma, saying that he would not resign.
Yes, I think it's the uncertainty of what the President Zuma is going to do. What we know is that the letter has been delivered to him. The question is whether or not he's going to do the right thing and accede to the request by the NEC. And I think what the ANC, NEC, or the entire ANC is hoping for is that he does the most simple thing, and that is to accept the decision of the NEC and resign. But we know that President Zuma has essentially now gone he's gone defiant. He's taking on his own organization, and he's basically saying to them, I'll take you to the brink. And this is what we've come to expect and see of President Zuma's presidency in the last several years. I think he's taken it to the tipping point at many stages in his presidency. We've seen this in the context of how he's dealt with his cabinet reshuffles, etc., etc. And so right now we cannot necessarily make a call to say he's going to resign. And I think he's not one of those individuals that will accept that this is how his legacy is going to end, in a sense of being recalled by his party. Despite what he may have said previously and saying that he puts the party above himself, I think right now, this is a president that is sitting and thinking to himself, I am not going to take this. And I think that's the uncertainty, the defiantness, the fact that he actually has gone rogue in his own organization, and the fact that they can't trust him anymore makes it even more complex for them.
The recent ANC-NEC meeting, as well as the election of the new top six, was marred with controversy, to some extent division and factionalism. In having a look at the past couple of hours per se, has the ANC managed to portray a more united front, specifically with handing over that recall letter to President Jacob Zuma?
I think, Shanti, what happened in that meeting, it took 13 hours. And a meeting that was, if there was enough consensus, if there was an overriding consensus and a fact that everybody was on the same page in that NEC meeting, it didn't need to take 13 hours. And I suspect what happened there was that there were definite discussions where people in the meeting, in the NEC, members of the NEC, etc., didn't necessarily agree with the kinds of decisions that were taken. And I think what really brought it out was when Cyril Ramaphosa had actually went back and went back to the presidential guest house in Pretoria around about just before midnight on Monday evening, and then came back with the report from the discussion. I think that in itself tells you that at the end of the day, consensus prevailed, but it prevailed in a very, very in a very vulnerable way, in a way that it wasn't an overwhelming consensus. I do think that within the NEC, there have definitely been individuals that perhaps have raised the question of what are the charges, why are you asking for his recall. We saw this in the NEC, in the press briefing by the SG, Ace Magashule, where there was no certainty of what were they recalling him on. And at the same time, there was contradictions and vagueness in that press briefing, where on the one hand, there was an indication that there was the decision taken that he will be recalled, but he didn't do anything wrong. And then at the same time, Ace Magashule is saying Cyril Ramaphosa will deliver the State of the Nation address. So I think based on that, we can actually then extrapolate to a certain extent that meeting on Friday, on Monday evening, that ended at about 3-4 o'clock Tuesday morning, indicated that it wasn't a smooth kind of discussion. But I also think that what we've seen now is some supporters, people who are diehard supporters of President Zuma, coming out and saying, this is an organizational decision. The organization is greater than the individual, and therefore President Zuma has to heed this decision by the NEC. And we saw, for example, the Minister of Finance speaking to CNN and talking about this whole process. And if President Zuma does not heed the decision, then of course you've got to go through Parliament. And so we have to also bear in mind is that within the organization now, we are seeing particular individuals who are diehard supporters starting to shift. But again, I think there are those that still stay within the party and have actually now have to put the party above their own so-called allegiances in terms of where they see themselves. And of course, remember, there's a new president of the party, and that's Cyril Ramaphosa. And Cyril Ramaphosa in itself, I think people are beginning to realign themselves, having noted that, of course, the power shifts have taken place systemically after this elective conference last year.
Definitely. And, you know, it is quite a confusing and a lengthy process. It's not as simple as one would seem that President Jacob Zuma would be recalled or he would resign. Take us through those exact steps. Should the president not resign now, what are the processes that are going to follow that we're going to see play out over the next couple of days, weeks, or even months?
Okay, so I think the simple process, or the simple one now is, let's see what the president says in the press briefing, whenever that's going to take place. And based on that, on what he articulates in that press briefing, I think then you'll be able to see where the ANC moves. Now, in the event that the president decides he's going to accept and move forward with the decision of the ANC in recalling him, then he has to write a letter to the Speaker of the National Assembly, noting and submitting his resignation. And then, of course, that process will play itself out in how we saw it play out in 2008 with President Mbeki. In that scenario, Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa will then become the acting president, I think for 30 days, and then, of course, you'll have to have the whole process of of election within the National Assembly and so forth. The second scenario is if President Zuma does not heed the call and decides that he can legally challenge this, or he says, well, I'm going to play this out and procrastinate it even further and frustrate you even further, then this is why we see Parliament meeting right now. The caucus is meeting, the special meeting of caucus at 11 o'clock. I'm not sure whether that will happen as scheduled now in terms of the parliamentary agenda for today, but nevertheless, that's a meeting. And in that meeting, I think the special meeting of the caucus in this regard will then become the critical point in which there'll be a decision there taken in terms of what do they do if President Zuma says, I'm not leaving anytime soon. And that means that they have to now decide how they're going to deal with this process within a parliamentary context. And within a parliamentary context, I think there's the question of do they then signal to the president, listen, you don't have the support, the necessary or the requisite support in caucus as well. So if you have to come to a motion of no confidence, if we have to see a motion of no confidence coming about, etc., you won't have the support to keep you as the president. But there's an added complication to this, and that is we haven't heard back from the Speaker of the National Assembly regarding the EFF's request to bring forward their own motion of no confidence debate. Now that means that the ANC either can negotiate with the EFF and ask them to take their table of no confidence off the to take their motion of no confidence off the table, or they could actually join them. But as we know, the ANC does not want an opposition party to actually bring a motion against their own member. So it's very complicated at this point. So within that second scenario, you may have a situation where in the next day or two, if the president decides he's not going to resign, you could have Parliament meeting. You could then have this motion of no confidence debated, depending what the EFF motion that is, depending what the Speaker decides, and I think she has to decide by today. And then you could then have the vote of no confidence put to the floor. You could see the ANC members deciding that they're going to vote against it, and then in the interim table their own motion of no confidence. So it's a very complicated process right now. And then, of course, we're not sure what are the legal issues here that the president is also probably consulting with his legal team about whether he can take this to the to the courts, in terms of asking and taking his own party to the court and asking them to give reasons or to provide some level of framework as to the context and the reasoning as to why they're asking him to resign. Because you must remember, this is a party political issue. It's not about the National Assembly. The National Assembly appoints the president, and so technically speaking, he is then appointed by the Parliament, and and in terms of Section 89, etc., as we see in the Constitution, you've got that motion of no confidence. We're not at that point in terms of impeachment. That's going to be an even longer process, because I think the rules are still being designed and put together around impeachment. So we are really sitting in limbo here, and we're sitting in a context of not sure and uncertainty and fluidity about what the next steps are. And it's all now dependent on what is happening within the ANC, which I think is very unacceptable.
Definitely, Sanusha. I'm going to bring Professor Sipho Ziyapa. He is joining us now via Pretoria, at our Pretoria studio. I'm going to bring him into the conversation, specifically touching on that issue of not necessarily this being a parliamentary issue, but also one of that of the ANC. A very good morning to you, Professor. Thank you very much for joining us. Just getting your view on how exactly you can describe the ANC actually handling the past couple of days and the recall of President Jacob Zuma.
Yeah, first I thought I should comment on the so-called orchestrated Gupta raids. And I think I agree with Sanusha that we should hope that it's coincidental, because if it is not coincidental, then we have a scenario where politics begin to interfere with law enforcement agencies. We do not want to have that situation. These institutions are established to be able to act without fear or favor. And if there is a view that suggests that they are acting on some political directive, then we have a problem. But now going back to the ANC, I think sometimes we tend to complicate these matters unnecessarily. What we have in terms of transition, there are things that the Constitution anticipates, and those are spelled out in terms of what needs to be done. If you want to remove the president of a head of state, there are processes. You go through impeachment, you go through motion of no confidence, and there's clarity in terms of what needs to happen, except that impeachment process is very long and it's almost like a trial, and it's more intensive and comprehensive. And I think the easiest that you would do is to go through a motion of no confidence, because it requires only a simple majority, not 2/3, as required for the case of impeachment. So that's part that. Then the second issue that is very simple, and we should not complicate it, is that the ANC has a difficulty in that it came from a national conference that was heavily contested. And that conference gave a simple victory to somebody like Cyril Ramaphosa with less than 2% and less than 200 votes. So what it means that the balance of forces in the ANC are the ones that create this need for them to engage each other, especially if they have to prepare themselves for the next election. You do not want to go to the next election disunited or divided. And this is what the president of the ANC has been putting across. Now, coming to President Zuma, he has actually said to the ANC, instead of listening to all the noise, what I need from the ANC is that you need to give me a declaration or a statement or a decision that has been taken by yourself. And upon that, then I'll apply my mind. And he has also said, and contrary to people who are saying he has refused to resign, he said he was willing to resign, and he has had a fruitful discussion, or at least that's what the Cyril Ramaphosa was saying, that they had a fruitful discussion around that matter, and they say it was constructive. And what they agreed on all matters, except the issue of duration. And he had asked, say, why don't we delay it by 3 months so that I can conclude a number of things and also could help you in terms of easing you into the position. Right. So the ANC did not buy it. But there is no way that the president has suggested that he wants to go to court. And when you listen to most members of the ANC, they are simply saying they expect that as a disciplined member, just like Thabo Mbeki simply resigned once he was recalled by his own party. So we're in the same situation. And at the moment, the fact that the president has, that there is a 10 o'clock press briefing that everybody announced, the president said he never did that. So we should not then start blaming the president for not giving a press conference that his officers he never wanted to give, or he had not prepared or announced that he was going to give. So I think we should stick
just
to
hold
the
it
facts.
there. Apologies, we're just going to have a recap here of what is making headlines this morning. Of course, if you have just tuned in on SABC Newsroom, we have been unpacking what is happening with the ANC transition with Sanusha Naidu as well as Professor Sipho Osiete. Of course, first up now, let's have a look at a recap of your headlines. Well, 2 arrests have been made as hawks raid the Gupta residence in Saxonwold. While President Jacob Zuma is expected to respond to the ANC's decision to recall him this morning, Parliament's multi-party chief whips are meeting to discuss the EFF's motion of no confidence in the president. Abroad, over 20,000 people flee their homes in Congo as ethnic violence intensifies. Of course, coming back to studio, if you have just tuned in, a very warm welcome to you watching SABC Newsroom, still in conversation with political analyst Sanusha Naidu from our Durban studios, as well as Professor Sipho Osiete, unpacking what we can expect and all the details around the latest on Zuma's recall and the media frenzy that we have had over the past couple of days. Just coming back into conversation with you, Professor, of course, you were touching on some of the issues, not only that have happened now, but some of the previous developments. Just continue with your conversation.
Yeah, I think what President Zuma is faced with is what Thabo Mbeki was faced with. Once you are, and the ANC has been very clear that people who serve in government and who have gone through the ticket of the ANC are deployees of the ANC. And the ANC has a right to recall them. But the ANC needs to make that decision. And that decision cannot be a decision that is informed by external forces, because the ANC, like all other parties, does not outsource that responsibility. So what had happened in the last few days was a pressure that has emerged, not only from societies externally, but also the triumphalist faction within the ANC. But also because they're also being realistic that you are going to have election and you're going to have a new face. And they felt that given the noise, it might be good for the organization to say to President Zuma, step down. And even before they call for a recall, he had, and with Cyril Ramaphosa, they had already been working on that. So the only difference was the timing. And the ANC, in its wisdom, has said, no, we are not going to give you 3 months. We want you to vacate as soon as possible. And some came up with the idea of 48 hours. So he has not responded to that. So that is where we are. But the issue of the court, I don't think it's going to fly. And I also don't think it will be in his interest to go through a parliamentary motion, because that would be embarrassing to the ANC. But what he has actually done is to force the ANC to say, you must own up to your decision. In the same way that he asked Thabo Mbeki, when Thabo Mbeki sent a delegation to him to say, please step aside, he said, the president of the ANC and the head of state has the powers to fire me. Let him own up to that decision. I'm not going to make life easy for him. And he has done exactly the same thing with the ANC. And it is not taking on the ANC. It simply says, you must be mature enough that if this is the decision that you make it so that you also are able to explain it to the branches who, when they met in December, one of the resolutions that did not exist in that meeting was the resolution of a recall. You have all other resolutions that speak to the material conditions of black people in general and Africans in particular that were put on the table. Those have been now put aside. So when they recall him as they did, they now have a challenge to go back to the branches and the delegate to say, we forgot about the primary mandate that you gave us. We decided to introduce a new one. So he was not making it easy for them, and I think it's the correct thing to do so that people own up to the decision that they make, but also that there should be a political education. So I don't think we should be alarmist. I think President Zuma will resign. As he had indicated, there will be those issues. That's why the Secretary General of the ANC was saying, I can't give you a deadline because things don't work like that in government. But resigning he will, he has agreed. It's simply an issue of time. And as the ANC has already announced, next week you're going to have a State of the Nation address. So that should tell you that President Zuma has only until the next coming few days for him to have stepped down, either today or tomorrow.
Definitely. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor Sipho Siepe from our Pretoria studios, as well as political analyst Sanisha Naidu. So good having you in studios in your various locations and joining us here on SABC Newsroom. Of course, we are pressed for time. I would love to continue unpacking the issues around that, as well as the Zuma recall and what we can expect and what is expected to develop throughout the course of the day. For now, though, let's have a look at some of our sporting. I'm not alone now. I'm joined in studio by Kendall Makamata. You good, Kendall? No,
very good. And actually, it makes for riveting viewing all the different analysis that's been coming out of it, what's happening in the ANC with President Jacob Zuma. With regards to the sport, really is about the cricket. We all know that the Proteas have done pretty badly in terms of what they're doing. But we've got some other sports for you, so make sure you stick around. This is what we've got for you today.
Ericsson, who went low and scored! What a comeback by Tottenham Hotspur! Ericsson has been absolutely superb!
Khwaja Samoa's Juventus squander a 2-0 lead in Turin against Tottenham Hotspur in their last 16 UEFA Champions League first leg tie last night, with the match finishing 2-2.
Speaking
of the last 16, PSL stragglers, Platinum Stars faced a tough prospect of trying to beat former log leaders Baroka FC to make it into the last 16 of the Nedbank Cup.
South Africa is in need of a frank dialogue about the state of our nation. My name is Onkgopotse JJ Tabane. Join me on Frankly Speaking every Sunday at 8:30. Come now, let's talk frankly.
Welcome to Media Monitor, the show that analyzes the big news stories that made headlines. We bring you robust discussions on stories that made headlines in the week, where we interact with media analysts to unpack these top stories. Join me every Sunday morning from 9 to 10 Central African Time as I bring you riveting news and analysis.
Stay tuned to Media Monitor every Sunday from 9 a.m.
Welcome back. My name is Kendall Makhamate. Time for a little bit of sports right here on Newsroom. Rohit Sharma scored 115 from 126 deliveries to guide India to a comprehensive 73-run win over South Africa in the 5th ODI played at St. George's Park in Port Elizabeth. The win sees the touring side clinch the 6-match ODI series 4-1 with a game to spare.
Having successfully chased at the Wanderers in the 4th ODI between the two teams, Eden Makram elected to field first after winning the toss. However, it was India who got off to a promising start, racing to 43 runs for no loss after 7 overs, Shikhar Dhawan being the aggressor contributing 30 from 21 deliveries. 2 balls later, South Africa made a breakthrough, Dhawan gone after skying Kagiso Rabada's delivery to deep square leg. Joined by his keeper Virat Kohli at the crease, Rohit Sharma, who has struggled with the bat throughout the ODI series, brought up his 50. The pair looked unbeatable, going on to bring up their 100-run partnership from 108 balls, which was their 13th in one-day internationals. That was shortly followed by Virat Kohli's run out.
Oh, it's a direct hit. That's brilliant. Dumini. He's had the presence of mind to take aim, but underarm at the stumps. So
India were their worst enemies. Anjike Rahan, who came in at number 4, didn't last long, also losing his wicket with a run out. Tabriz Shamsi dropped Sharma on 97, and the men whose selection have been questioned made the most of that, registering his 2nd ODI century against South Africa. The latter's innings proved instrumental in guiding India to a defendable total of 274 for the loss of 7 wickets at the end of their 50 overs. Beside the opener Hashim Amla, who scored 71 from 92 balls, the South Africans never really got going in their reply. They were bowled out for 201, India claiming victory by 73 runs. Joseph Mohali, SABC News.
So, of course, we need to ask you this question. They've been flat, the Proteas, throughout the ODI series against India. What is it that has gone wrong? We've been asking you to bring us your comments throughout the morning on social media, and we've got a few that we can share of what's going wrong with the Proteas. Trained Eye says something about President Zuma, and that is, of course, also a massive story that we're looking forward to. But we'll definitely be bringing you back some tweets, and here they are. I've got 1 or 2 that we can share with you already. Ashraf Garda says the water shortage's impacts on the Proteas clearly no longer in full bloom. Nice one. Touche, Ashraf. And Tlantla Shabisa says recall the entire teams, says Ntlantla. And everybody's like playing the political card and bringing it into play right here. Tibato reckons our A-list batsmen never came to the party. Yes, they didn't. You're right. We cannot really expect our games to be won by bowlers in all innings. And Nazim comes in with, can we pose a question to the coach? But to me, they were outclassed by India. You know, we've also got some comments by Otis Gibson. We'll bring you in the next hour. Cash says, black players, marginalization. They come and go. When whites are not available, the team is no core team structure. Hashtag Black Panther. I would say that you're using that particular hashtag in the wrong way, Cash. Don't quite get what you're saying, but hey, you are entitled to an opinion, are you not? Now look at football, where Ike Gundogan dazzled with 2 goals in Manchester City's 4-0 romp at FC Basel to leave the Premier League leaders on the verge of Champions League quarterfinals. And Tottenham Hotspur recovered from conceding twice in the opening 9 minutes to secure a draw away to Juventus in the first leg of the Champions League last 16 last night. Let's have a look at the highlights.
Not even a wall, really, just one man in it. It's through to England. What a start for Juventus. And Tottenham didn't line up the defence properly for a free kick. And Juve are ahead in the opening couple of minutes. A disastrous start for Tottenham Hotspur. And Sukic, a yard quicker than Ooh, it's a risky challenge in there, Davis. And the referee, and this is Higuain for 2-0, Juventus right from the start. Oh, the goalkeeper got a hand to it, couldn't keep it out. And Juventus lead against Tottenham Hotspur by 2 goals to 0 in the opening 10 minutes. As Maxi Allegri will insist all his players do. Here's Dele Alli for Spurs. Kane, the flag has stayed down around Buffon. Harry Kane! Tottenham back in the tie. Mella stands to the left. It's going to be Eriksson who went low and scores! What a comeback by Tottenham Hotspur! Eriksson has been absolutely superb. They were 2-0 down after 9 minutes. In by De Bruyne, and the header's in from Gundogan. As simple as that. De Bruyne looking for Sterling. Aguero is waiting, comes through to Bernardo Silva, and it's in for 2-0. Here with Barca, won 5-0. Aguero, brilliant! The goalkeeper didn't even move. Aguero's found Gundogan, might take it on, he does, and scores again. And Manchester City have their 4th goal. And it's Basel 0, Manchester City 4.
Now, as exciting as all of that was, we also have something akin to what some people also known as the FA Cup in England. We have the Nedbank Cup, a very lucrative tournament that a lot of teams, both from the PSL as well as the lower leagues, all try and do well in. It's also got some impact on what happens in terms of what happens on the African continent. Let's talk Nedbank Cup. With me is SABC sports reporter Mduduzi Ndlovu. Good morning, sir. Thank you very much for coming through. Ibaba, can you tell me, what is your take so far with the lower ranked teams rubbing shoulders with top flight football teams?
I can tell you one thing, Kendall. When it comes to FA Cup, be it local or international, you can't count out their smaller teams. The so-called smaller teams are your Davids versus your Goliaths of the PSL.
Yes.
They always surprise teams. You can ask Kaizer Chiefs. They know Baroka. You can ask Orlando Pirates. They know Maluti FC. We can. The list is just endless, Kendall. What I can say here is that these teams, these players from these lower ranked teams, they want lucrative contracts. They are selling themselves. That's why they give it their all. They leave everything in the field of play. So you can't count them out if and when they are playing against these so-called bigger teams who are playing their trade in the ABSA Premiership and the NFD.
Well, let's look at today's matches. You mentioned a little about Baroka FC, and I'm going to get to that just now. But should Platinum Stars use this match to get a boost in their confidence, considering that they're sitting at the bottom of the PSL table?
Tell you what, it's a catch-22 situation for Roger Tisa and his side. Because on one hand, he wants to save his players for ABSA Premiership matches so that he can move from the bottom of the log. On the other hand, he'll want to give it, they want to give it their all so that they can get this momentum, so that they can lift themselves from the bottom of the log. So it's 50-50 chances for them. He'll be so confused on what to do exactly, to go all out or else save his players for next matches that will come in the ABSA Premiership. Kendall. That's the situation with Roger Tisa. Tell you what, another thing, Roger Tisa is one good coach, take nothing away from him. he's one brilliant coach, but the crop of players and the situation that is happening in Platinum Stars, the team being sold or not sold, the consortium and all those things are affecting the team in the field of play. We can see that the results are not coming. The players are good. We know Yongambi, we know your Viomer. Those are the players who are just the core of the team, but they are not performing to the best of their abilities because it is affecting them mentally and otherwise what is happening in the boardroom. Because the team, since the beginning of the season, there were rumors that the team is being sold and the consortium that is coming in to take over from the Royal Bafokeng family, and that is bringing instability into the team.
I can imagine the same is happening with Baroka FC. I mean, the coach has been rumored, well, basically he's got a suspension for drinking on the bus after that last loss. Quite a lot of instability amongst the PSL teams. But let's go have a look-see at what's happening at the last 16 draw that's happening tomorrow. How far do you think these two sides will get? I mean, whoever wins, as you can see right now, we've literally talking Platinum Stars and Baroka. How far do you think whoever wins will get?
Baroka have a chance. For me, Baroka, from where I'm seated, Baroka have a chance to go all the way. Maybe they might make it to the last 16 or even last 8. Who knows? They're a good side. They have proven this season. I was watching them. I've been watching them and following them. And the likes of Gift Mutupa, who's on loan from Orlando Pirates, is just a revelation for the team since he rejoined them on loan from Orlando Pirates. He's one prolific striker who's just giving them a good result so far.
My question would be, where do you think the Stellenbosch's and so on and so forth, the Richards Bay teams, where do you think they'll be able to get to? Because, I mean, this is the great story, like you said, the David Goliath. Where do you think they'll get to?
Stellenbosch were disappointed not to make it to the ABSA Premiership. You remember that they were playing in the playoffs last season. They were eager to get into the ABSA Premiership, but it wasn't to be. But this season, they are not doing very well in the NFD. Highlands Park, they are running away with that championship in NFD. I'm telling you, I can just put my man on it that Highlands Park, they are coming back to the ABSA Premiership. Stellenbosch, they are always found wanting. I don't know what happened to them since those playoff matches where they were just showing that promise and the eagerness to go and play in the ABSA Premiership.
In closing, can we expect a Soweto derby or maybe a Pirates Sundowns match?
Pirates Sundowns match will be a mouth-watering encounter, Kendall. Tell you why I'm saying this. Pirates went to Pretoria and they got 3 goals to 1, winning against the Mamelodi Sundowns. And one bit of Msimane doesn't like losing against one Orlando Pirates team.
Nice one, Du. Thank you so much for that. I think as a little preview, a little sneak preview what's going to happen tonight, as well as what you can expect in the draw, that was pretty good. Thank you very much.
Pleasure, Papa.
Now, there you have it. Duduzi Ndlo will talk to us about the Nedbank Cup, and it's now time for a little bit of weather forecast to see what's going on. Let's hope for more rain in Cape Town.
Thank you very much. And let's take a look at your weather details, starting off with our satellite image showing us a lot of cloud here over the central parts of the country, leaving behind clear skies over the Western Cape. But those clear skies over the Western Cape are just coming just behind some rains that we had over the Western Cape, which is good news here along the southern coastline in towards the interior. We had very big systems that just started over the west and then rampaged through the whole country, moving towards the eastern parts. But most of the rain is just sitting here to the south of Lesotho. And as the day progresses, I'm talking about tomorrow, we're still seeing a bit of heavy rains here, southern Free State, interior of the Eastern Cape and parts of KwaZulu-Natal provinces. Those areas surrounding Lesotho, there is a watch out for heavy rain, which may lead to localized flooding, so do be wary of those. And looking at the interior, once again, isolated thunderstorms through towards central Namibia and parts of southern Botswana, still seeing those isolated thunderstorms. Otherwise, partly cloudy skies for the whole of Botswana. Northern parts of Zimbabwe, expecting isolated thunderstorms, while in Angola, once again, we're still seeing those isolated thunderstorms. The temperatures for today, this afternoon, we're seeing a high of 33 if you're in Springbok, 35 in Uppington. Further north, we're seeing Polokwane with lower maximum temperature of 29, but just to the north of that, we're seeing Musine at 32. Along the coastal areas, PE is windy and hot with the possibility of some thunderstorms later on in the day with a high of 32. Durban, 28, lovely warm weather throughout the day and isolated thunderstorms possible in the afternoon. Looking at Botswana, there isn't a lot of rain here in Botswana, mostly in the south and these areas closer to Namibia. But Namibia, there is a possibility of rain. Windhoek is peaking at 31, while in places like central parts of Botswana, southern parts, Gaborone is at 33, and Zimbabwe once again continues with those rainfalls. Lower maximum temperature of 24 is expected in the north, but as we look towards Madagascar, now we're starting to see a clearing from the north. All the rains are moving towards the southern part, and as you can see, even hotter temperatures in the north. I have 33, but in the south, lower maximum temperature of 24. And coming back towards African Republic, we're seeing Kigali at 27, Nairobi also at 27, with no rain over the eastern parts. But as we move towards the west, we're seeing more rainfalls here in places like Brazzaville and Kinshasa. Heavier rains just to the north of Angola. I'll leave your weather here for now. Remember, everywhere you go, take the weather with you.
Teaching microbiology differently.
They actually look at questions such as what is life, using microorganisms and so on to create art.
She believes that in this way students get a better grasp of the subjects they are studying.
But for my students, I wanted them to engage with the subject matter that I was teaching them in a way that is different from just learning it in a textbook. So I asked them to take one of the concepts that we dealt with, which is basically to do with evolution or microbial diversity, and to make an artifact. I didn't say the word artwork because science students and art is not traditionally considered together. So they could make anything. And that was then assessed, so it was a form of alternative assessment.
Even human beings' tears look spectacular under a microscope.
This is a painting installation by a first year called Shanique, and it's about tears. And they say that if you cry or if you're cross, the tears look different. Or if you cry out of pain, the tears under a microscope will look different.
Bio-art has also been found in rock engravings at Drieskop Island in the Northern Cape. By Samuel, SABC News, Bloemfontein.
Two arrests have been made. I do understand at this point that one who is a Gupta family member.
The ANC Parliamentary Special Caucus is expected to start any time now, this as the nation still awaits an address from the President. The High Court is today expected to rule on Patricia de Lille's application to have a secret ballot during a vote of no confidence against her during a council meeting tomorrow.
Big appeal and given. It's game, set and match.
The Proteas put in another awful display of indifferent cricket and get swept aside by India in the fifth ODI, losing the match by 73 runs and the series with it.
History has been achieved in Port Elizabeth, winning by 73 runs. That is.
And that's why we leave it for now. But now back to Shantae, who's got all the news.
Indeed, hello and welcome to Newsroom. I'm Shante Yankees, coming to you live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg. A lot's coming up between now and 12 p.m. in the last hour, including the latest from that ANC government transition, as well as a press briefing, a media briefing that we are waiting for, as well as news from our African continent and abroad. Well, let's have a look at your top story. A third suspect has been arrested as hawks pounce on controversial Gupta residence in Saxonwold. Two people are expected to hand themselves over to the hawks by the end of today. It has been confirmed that the operations are linked to the controversial Estina dairy project in Freda in the Free State, as well as the investigation into the alleged state capture. We spoke earlier to our reporter, Griselda Lewis, on the ground, who was reporting live from the Gupta compound.
We can confirm at this stage that now a third person has been arrested. The official communication that we received from the Hawks is that so far 3 people have been arrested and 2 other suspects are expected to hand themselves over to the Hawks. The Hawks say that operations are still ongoing and further details will be made available at a later stage. Now recall, 2 had been arrested here at the Gupta family home here in Saxonwold. 1 is a Gupta family member and the other is a business associate. We understand the third person who was arrested somewhere in Johannesburg. We're not sure of the exact details at this point, but official confirmation from the Hawks there that a third person has now been arrested, and them saying that 2 other suspects are expected to hand themselves over. Official confirmation from the Hawks as well that this is in respect of the Freda farm investigations, and we understand that some of the other arrests and those who are expected to hand themselves over relate to a leg of the state capture investigation that you know has been underway by the Hawks. Much quieter here at the Saxonwold home of the Guptas at this stage. Very unclear about whether there were any other Gupta family members inside this compound when the Hawks pounced on it this morning. But all indications, Shante, at this point is that the information that I received is that the Hawks were eyeing 13 other suspects relating to the Freda farm investigation, as well as 2 other suspects relating to the state capture, a leg of the state capture investigation. So definitely at this stage, we do expect more arrests to be made in these matters. We're expecting further communication from the Hawks at a later stage, because we do understand that this is not the only residence that is being raided. There's some speculation at this point that there are some raids taking place in Bedford View. We cannot confirm that at this stage. Bedford View, for those who don't know, is here in Johannesburg. But the previous statement by the Hawks also did indicate that several raids are being conducted. Now, let me just clarify on the issue of raids there, Shante. When I did speak to the Hawks spokesperson a bit earlier on, he did indicate that these were not per se raids, but direct arrests. So I guess that the Hawks do believe at this point that they are ready to make these arrests and that their investigations are at a very sensitive stage at this point, and, because they would not have made those arrests in the first place. So we are expecting more arrests in this matter. So far, a third person has now been arrested and 2 other suspects are expected to hand themselves over.
Well, the ANC Special Caucus is expected to start shortly in Parliament. The meeting has been convened to discuss the President's recall. The meeting was scheduled to start at 10 o'clock this morning and was then shifted to 11. For the latest, we are joined by SABC reporter in Parliament, Annalise Dubase. A very good morning to you. Thank you very much for giving us an update. Essentially, why has the postponement taken place of the ANC caucus, and what essentially is expected to be discussed this morning?
Well, Shante, as you said in your introduction, that the meeting was supposed to have taken place at 10 o'clock, but unfortunately there was that report that President Zuma will be making a statement at 10 o'clock. So they decided to shift this meeting to 11 o'clock right now. As I'm talking to you right now, a number of members of Parliament and members of ANC cabinet ministers are just trickling into this caucus room just in front of me. It is expected to kick off any time now as soon as the top 6 officials of the ANC arrive. We understand that Paul Mashatile, the Treasurer General, will be the one who will be addressing this caucus and will be accompanied by Ace Makashule. We don't know exactly what time will it take place. It is already just after 11, but the caucus room is almost full to capacity now, and we expect to see members of the top 6 officials arriving at any time from now.
Annalise, what is likely to feature prominently on the agenda this morning?
Well, the password here, Chantel, is about a vote of no confidence in President Zuma. You'll recall that yesterday Isma Kashula told journalists in Johannesburg that they have asked him to resign, and he have asked for the extension of his resignation of up to 3 to 6 months. But that was not acceptable to ANC. Now, this caucus briefing is part of a series that will go on throughout the weekend to brief all the structures of the ANC, but it is expected or anticipated that the caucus can also make or take a decision that the president be recalled or a vote of no confidence be passed against President Zuma. But there's another tricky situation there, that the EFF is already having a motion of no confidence or a proposal of a motion of confidence still standing. Now, at 2 o'clock this afternoon, right here in Parliament, the chief whips of parties, including the EFF, will be meeting. We suspect that they will be asking the EFF to withdraw its own motion of no confidence so that the ANC could put its own motion of confidence so that they can vote immediately, and then as early as Monday, Mr. Ramaphosa can make the State of the Nation address so that there could be a budget statement on the 21st as scheduled. That's how things are right now, Chantel. But as to how they will pan out from now onward, time will tell.
Essentially, it always boils down to the numbers, doesn't it, Manalisi? In the eventuality of going through with the motion of no confidence, does the caucus have enough numbers behind them?
Well, you're right that, you know, the ANC has always had numbers. I mean, whatever they would want passed in Parliament, they usually got it. But the situation since December has changed totally. Whether the ANC MPs would listen to the top officials or top 6 officials if they tell them to maybe delay a vote of no confidence, whether they will listen to them, nobody will be sure about that, because we have seen in the last vote of no confidence that 25 of them, you know, ignored the ANC message. So this time around, the stakes are even higher. And the mood right here around here, you can see that if, you know, their body languages is anything to go by, that the situation has totally changed and anything can happen. So the ANC would obviously want to take control of the situation and try to move it as fast as it can possibly do. So I suspect that that motion of no confidence, because it seemed to be one aspect that is in the top of the agenda here, might be agreed upon right here in this caucus, and the date for that motion of no confidence could be set right here. It might be tomorrow, it might be on Friday, but I suspect that it might be as soon as before this coming weekend.
Indeed, thank you very much for giving us an update there. That was SABC reporter in Parliament, Manalisi Dubase, as we await for that caucus meeting to start. It is set to start in a couple of moments from now in Parliament in Cape Town. We will take you live as soon as proceedings begin. Well, ANC National spokesperson Ule Mabe earlier spoke to SABC News on a number of reasons on why President Jacob Zuma has been recalled.
Of a sitting president of the Republic is one form of dealing with that kind of a transition.
So in a nutshell, the only reason that's been given by the ANC that President Jacob Zuma is being recalled is purely for transitional purposes, nothing else.
Well, I'm sure that you will appreciate that when the National Executive Committee sit to deliberate on this and many other issues, it will have applied its mind to numerous other details, you know, and in this instance, the feeling was that, look, we're going into elections in 2019. It is important that we prepare our machinery so that our structures are geared for those processes.
Yeah.
So we felt that it might be necessary that you begin with that process much earlier.
Pule, there's also reports circulating, and especially if you're giving the reason as transitional purposes behind the recall of President Jacob Zuma. There are absolute firm reports doing the round that President Jacob Zuma may reach out to the Constitutional Court for this recall. Is this something that you can confirm to us? I mean, is this in the pipeline? Have you heard anything?
Well, I must confirm that the ANC, when our continuous interactions with President Zuma, who has been president of the ANC, who is a loyal and disciplined cadre of the movement, have been quite cordial. I mean, relations are not strained. So we firmly believe that President Zuma remains a disciplined member of the ANC and would do what is best for a cadre of the movement to be able to allow the National Executive Committee to process his decisions, because he led the ANC. There were times when the collective he led had taken decisions, and he had to make sure that he act to implement those. I mean, I had an opportunity of serving with him in the previous collective, and I can assure you of the discipline of President Zuma. And I don't think that we should be second-guessing him. You know, I think we should allow him that space to be able to brief the nation and I can assure you that as he does that, he will also make sure that the interest of the people of South Africa and that of the ANC is placed first. Because President Zuma was part of the National Liberation Project and understand why we must move this country forward.
Let me just quickly, there's one or two more questions I need to ask you. This deadline, because yesterday, Ace Magashule said there is no deadline. The president's got as long as he wants to. But before that, it was said that there's a 48-hour deadline, which of course ends today. Is there or isn't there a deadline?
Well, you see, Leanne, in the newsroom, a deadline might mean different things.
No. 48 hours is 48 hours.
I'm actually going there.
Okay,
I'm saying a deadline might mean different things.
Yeah.
One, the fact that the Secretary General of the ANC had already made it clear that the National Executive Committee, in arriving at this decision, had said it would prefer that President Ramaphosa delivers the State of the Nation's address, and also said that it would prefer that the State of the Nation's address is delivered before the budget speech. You will know that one thing like the budget speech is quite prescriptive by law. It has got to happen before the 1st of March so that we can begin with our program to deliver services to the masses of our people and all of that.
Okay, so the deadline?
So I'm just saying, if you look at the fact that you need to have SONA much
so today is the deadline, is what you're saying. Today is the deadline. President Jacob Zuma has to respond today.
He has already given that undertaking to the officials.
So he's given that undertaking.
Yes.
And just finally, SONA, is it going to happen? Are we going to have a State of the Nation address? I mean, constitutionally, do we really have to have one?
Yes, well, we are going to have a State of the Nation's address. And that State of the Nation's address, in terms of what the ANC has already placed on record, is that it must be addressed by President Ramaphosa, who has got to ascend as the President of the Republic.
Opopo Malefe also spoke to SABC News earlier on why it has taken so long for the ANC to recall the president.
Well, firstly, the man is fighting for his survival. He knows he's got many criminal charges, which are to be preferred against him. Of course, he had said that he wants his day in court, but we know that he never means what he says. But the second thing is that in 2007 and subsequently in 2012, when the National Executive Committee of the ANC was elected in Parliament, they systematically ensured that a lot of people in that executive committee are cronies, and many of them got compromised in the rampant corruption that has been taking place in the country. So all of them, well, let me not say all of them, quite a significant number of them, therefore know that if the dawn of that group goes down, all of them would follow. So they are fighting to stay in office. Of course, as Sipho has correctly pointed out, they have disabled the very important institutions of law enforcement, which ensure the rule of law in the country. And they know that with those institutions being weak, they can stay forever in office and continue this corruption.
Yeah, I mean, both of you have been in governmental positions. You were premier. You've been there too in the capacity of Labour. Is it that difficult to get rid of a member of your party, of the ANC, that is clearly breaking the Constitution, even though the ANC hasn't come out and said that clearly. You know, there were no reasons given yesterday, but it appears from the outset, from the outside, that it is a very difficult thing to do. Is it? Or is it just for this particular man?
I think it's indecisiveness. It is for this particular man. I think they've created a Frankenstein in the leadership of the organization. We have served with President Nelson Mandela. We disagreed with him on many occasions in that NEC. But he was a man of conscience and goodwill. He listened to the rational arguments presented and never insisted on having his way and nothing else. But the kind of leadership we have had since 2007 is a very strange leadership that is alien to the traditions of our movement and the democratic systems that we set up in 1993 through the interim constitution and the final constitution in 1994. So I think it's this indecisiveness and the fact that many of the people who are supposed to be making decisions to remove him were compromised. I mean, well, somebody said I mustn't talk about press. I was going to give you an example of what happens when you go to Parliament talking about corruption. You have the MPs actually fighting you for fighting corruption. You know,
well, that's
the problem we've got.
Well, let's take a look at President Jacob Zuma's presidency, both domestically and internationally, from a policy point of view.
On a cloudy, rainless day in Pretoria on May 9, 2009, Jacob Zuma, a former head boy, political prisoner, freedom fighter, and intelligence specialist, was finally inaugurated as the country's third democratically elected president. After a bruising fight for the ANC presidency, Zuma was a man who understood political chess.
In the presence of everyone assembled here, and in full realization of the high calling I assume as President of the Republic of South Africa.
It was the beginning of a long, winding journey that would last almost 9 years. And Zuma wanted his own stamp of authority, his own legacy. He moved his first pawn forward. The country had been battling a high number of deaths due to AIDS-related illnesses. Zuma's AIDS programs were met with resounding applause, particularly from AIDS activists. His policy would see the major rollout of treatment nationwide. Life expectancy increased from 56 to 63.
I felt it necessary that I should give this leadership and take the test today so that all of us in the country should begin to take the test.
And the new head of state placed a high premium on education. He started by introducing a basic education and higher education ministry.
The Department of Education will be split into separate ministries, one for basic education and the other for higher education and training.
Not only did he announce free tertiary education for the poor, under his watch, 2 new universities were built. The University of Mpumalanga and Salt Lake University in Northern Cape meant that all provinces had higher learning institutions. Under his watch, the National Development Plan was adopted, a blueprint to addressing the country's economic challenges. And the country abolished load shedding, with more other players and more units coming online at Medupi and Kusilo power stations. He also appointed former public protector Thulima Donsela and Chief Justice Mogoeng.
The only matters that are excluded from the mandate of the public protector are court decisions and matters outside the public sector.
And as in a chess, some pieces would just have to be shared. He undertook his first cabinet reshuffle in 2010. Several more followed during his 2 terms in office, as more pieces on the board needed to be shelved.
I've decided to make changes to the national executive in order to improve efficiency and effectiveness.
As the country sought to rebrand itself, new banknotes featuring Madiba's face were unveiled. When the president came to power, the globe had just been hit by a massive economic meltdown. In an effort to mitigate the situation, the multi-billion rand infrastructure rollout program was announced. This saw thousands of jobs being created, though the economy shared close to 1 million jobs. Even promises of 1 million job opportunities did not materialize as the economy struggled to recover.
So help me God.
In 2014, President Zuma was sworn in for a second term. The party had been returned to power by 62% of the vote, a decline from 66% in his first term. In his drive to seek new economic opportunities, President Zuma also spearheaded Operation Phakisa. The focus was on the ocean's economy. This has unlocked thousands of potential job opportunities along the country's vast coastline.
Since the inception of Operation Phakisa, ocean's economy, over 4,500 jobs have been created in the various sectors.
South Africa in 2010 successfully hosted the Soccer World Cup. However, upgrades to the road infrastructure which led to the e-tolls have been largely rejected by Gauteng motorists. The Black Industrialist Program is another project which has sought to get black entrepreneurs involved in the economy of the country. Having assumed office in May 2009, his first foreign assignment was a 3-nation tour where he attended the AU summit in Sirte, Libya, before proceeding to L'Aquila, Italy for a then G8 summit and then a gathering in Egypt. At the G8, he met US President Barack Obama for the first time. While many predicted that Zuma would spend more time on domestic issues, he was also frequently on the world stage. He was instrumental in getting South Africa to join the major growing economic bloc, BRIC, which comprised of Brazil, Russia, India and China. Upon South Africa joining it, it was renamed BRICS. South Africa championed the formation of the BRICS Bank, which is a regional office in South Africa.
We welcome the decision to prepare a new BRICS-led development bank for inclusive and sustainable development projects. Such a bank has great potential to help us create good jobs in developing countries.
Across the border, he continued efforts to stabilize the troubled situation in Zimbabwe. In the region, Lesotho also became a source of concern following the coup attempt, and a special envoy in the form of Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa was deployed. His efforts went beyond SADC, with South Africa taking a keen interest in the continent's youngest country, South Sudan. There were ongoing efforts to stabilize the DRC. In the United Nations, he called for change to the Security Council, urging African countries to be admitted to that body.
As a country that voluntarily dismantled its nuclear weapons program, South Africa is of the firm view that there are no safe hands for weapons of mass destruction.
South Africa's attempts at resolving the Libyan question saw it support the resolution that eventually led to the ousting and killing of Libyan President Muammar Gaddafi, a source of great regret for the administration. South Africa also headed various continental bodies during President Zuma's tenure, including the chairmanship of African Union and the regional body SADC. The conflict resolution in various parts of the continent continued. Perhaps an affirmation of South Africa's stature in the continent and beyond. Zuma will be remembered for many reasons, good and bad, but no one will doubt his leadership in bringing peace to Burundi and brokering peace in the once politically volatile KZN. Mzwandile Mbeje, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, our question of the day on SABC Newsroom this morning is, what do you make of the way the ANC handled the recall of President Jacob Zuma? Continue to send us your comments. And also our comment that we're running with regards to our poll today is, of course, do you think President Jacob Zuma will resign? With just some of those votes coming in, just over 1,000 votes coming in. 38% of you are saying yes, 62% of you are still saying President Jacob Zuma will not resign. We'll have a look at some tweets when we come back. For now, though, let's take a short break here on SABC Newsroom.
When life takes a different turn.
If I didn't eat the speak, he was going to evict me.
Your will to persevere is ignited.
I'm not a professional speaker, but I'll try my best to give you a word of inspiration.
He was just trying to provide for his family.
If you can't accept it, change it. If you cannot change it, accept it.
And a new story begins.
Made a resolve to myself. I'm learning something new.
Upilong, every Friday at 5:30. Be part of the life-changing journey.
Well, the third suspect has been arrested as hawks pounce on controversial Gupta residents in Saxonwold. ANC Parliamentary Special Caucus is expected to start any time now, this as the nation still awaits an address from the president. Over 20,000 people flee their homes in Congo as ethnic violence intensifies. Indeed, let's have a look at some of the tweets that we have been looking at with regards to our question of the day here, SABC Newsroom. Well, President Zuma must take the ANC to the CCMA. They haven't given reason for his removal. Wandile says the ANC protected and shielded Zuma even when it was clear he had no regard for the party or the citizens of this country. Outrageous behavior from Wandile. And Fearless Pule on Twitter says they are still treating him with kid gloves. Why negotiate with him? Let's have a look at some of the tweets that have been coming in with regards to our poll that we've been running this morning. Just over 1,000 participants in our poll this morning. Michael Big M says, no, and I wish he doesn't. We the people voted for him and not the ANC NEC. That is a puppet to the opposition parties. Wish he can see out his term because clearly Cyril Ramaphosa cannot wait for 2019. And if he was to resign, my ANC will lose more voters they claim that they are trying to keep. This one coming in from Seven Colors saying that he will probably say, why must I resign? I did nothing wrong. This, of course, on our poll on whether we think President Jacob Zuma will resign. Nazim says, I really don't care what he's going to say. Today, he must go. Hashtag NEC, hashtag ANC NEC Presser, SABC News. Well, we're going to have to wait and see what unfolds throughout the course of the morning. A caucus is set to take place in just a couple of moments from now. And a possible media briefing was supposed to take place at 10 a.m. No word on that. We will be giving you updates on that, though. Well, as President Jacob Zuma's timeless reign is slowing down to an abrupt end, Stakeholders in business, labour and politics are describing it as the most disastrous since the dawn of democracy. On his watch, the country lost a record number of more than 5 million jobs. Unemployment rose to nearly 30%, and virtually all rating agencies downgraded the country to almost junk status.
And he inherited sound fiscus with a very healthy budget surplus. However, in the last medium-term budget policy statement, growth was revised down to 0.7% following a recession in the fourth quarter of 2016 and the first quarter of 2017. Government debt risen from 4.4% of GDP in 2007 to 17.6% in 2017. On his watch, the country has experienced a consistent negative global investor sentiment, which resulted in large capital outflows. These and other shortcomings of his administration have led to some lawmakers declaring that the country is facing a fiscal cliff.
His legacy is 9.4 million people who do not have jobs, who have given up looking for jobs, 30.4 million people who live in poverty, and large-scale looting at zombie state-owned enterprises that now require billion-rand bailouts from pensioners. I don't think that it's an exaggeration to say that President Jacob Zuma over the last decade has murdered the economy in South Africa.
If you were to look at the economic indicators at the time when he took over government in 2009, whether you're looking in terms of the debt to GDP ratio at the time, and general fiscal prudence of the government at the time. He took over a government that was government finances that were in sound health, but in a very short space of time, due to corruption and issues of state capture, that debt has ballooned to about 60% of GDP, but there's very little to show for it on the ground. But if you also want to look at the negative effect of President Zuma's leadership, one is to look no further than the current economic growth rate of this country, primarily because a lot of people have lost confidence in the leadership of President Zuma and his administration.
Both Mania and Kwankwa argue that declining business confidence and uncertainty, which have been dominant factors during his reign, have substantially capped foreign direct investments and entrenched low economic growth. They say these have resulted in credit rating downgrades, rapid exchange rate depreciation, and massive capital flight. Labor experts say the working class and the poor have been the most hard hit by these developments. Ironically, Zuma was brought to power based on the fact that he was friendly to the poor and the working class, but the plight worsened during his administration.
The point is, what we have here is a series of ad hocism in terms of policy making. And I mean, that's and peppered, of course, with corruption, with thievery, etc. A kleptocracy, a system of self-enrichment is never good for workers. And there's been nothing that's been done in terms of a coherent industrial policy or anything that would benefit workers. So we've had more and more job losses, and I suspect we will have more going ahead. We also have on the books at the moment in Parliament three basic two amendments to legislation, one new bill, that's the minimum wages bill, and amendments to the LRA, the Labour Relations Act, and the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, which are actually going to undermine what the power workers already enjoy.
What is worse, according to Bell, was a split within COSATU, which he argues has severely weakened the union and eroded workers' power.
Principled unity is the perfect thing, is the best thing. Unity for the sake of unity, which is what the ANC is pushing and what Zuma has been pushing, is wrong. But he has, because of this business of being allied to, the COSATU being allied to the government and this press for unprincipled unity, we've had a splits in the unions. And any split within the organised workers is bad for workers. It weakens the working class, it weakens the ability of workers to negotiate better wages, conditions, skills, uplifting, etc.
Bell says Zuma leave office amid high levels of unemployment and job losses.
The country is also facing close to 51 billion rand hole in revenue collection.
Several state-owned enterprises are mired in mismanagement and poor corporate governance. Speculation is rife that personal income tax and value-added tax are likely to become targets of Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba, as he will be trying to plug this multi-billion rands fiscal hole in his next budget speech. Manelisi Tubase, SABC News, Parliament.
Well, continuing with reactions on the ANC-NEC's decision to recall President Jacob Zuma, SABC economic reporter Nompumelelo Sibiza joins us from the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Very good morning to Nompumelelo. Of course, just before you talk to your guests, which I believe you have with you, how are the markets reacting to the current political developments?
Shanti, well, basically what's happening on the markets is that they're in positive territory at the moment, but of course you're crossing to me specifically to find out how they're reacting to Jacob Zuma and his no-show and obviously the events that are taking place at the moment. Well, to unpack some of these issues, I'm joined by Kanti Pai. He's a director and economist at Nassim Advisory. Thanks for joining us, sir.
It's my pleasure.
Good stuff. So with this limbo, we expected President Jacob Zuma to speak to us at 10 o'clock. It didn't happen. The presidency say that there was never that type of communication, yet many of us who deal with these institutions on a day-to-day basis were convinced that this was happening. So now my question to you is, how has this state of limbo affected the rand, for example, or do you think it really hasn't affected it? I see that it's actually firmed quite a lot. It's at 11.85 relative to the dollar.
Look, I think a lot of people are hoping that, that it's not a matter of time, so the postponement doesn't sort of mean that it's not happening. And I think for a while, in the first instance, of course, his departure is almost priced in, right, because we had that whole positive momentum when we heard, Cyril Ramaphosa is coming in, and suddenly, over the past week or two, when we have been understanding that, the president will resign. And I think a lot of people now are just waiting patiently that, as we have been told, I keep thinking that this is the most uninforming statement. It is a matter of time. Of course, it's always been a matter of time. But I think that a lot of people are now sort of just sit patiently. And of course, there's a lot of communication. I think also the officers of the ANC have been speaking, to market participants, telling them, we are working on this. These are the challenges we are facing, but, be steady, we are doing it. So I think a lot of that work has been quite important, and I hope actually the ANC continues in this vein in terms of actually communicating to people, even behind back doors, in terms of things that they can't say, but also keeping in touch with the market.
So what's your understanding now, given the fact that there hasn't been a statement, and if there isn't a statement by the end of the day, the deadline, which was 10 a.m., has long gone. What's your understanding about what the series of processes should be, and does it mean that by the end of the week, that motion of no confidence will have happened and he'll be gone?
Well, I think the whole thing about the motion of no confidence is, I think, is a bit dangerous thing for the ANC, in the sense that, of course, as they try to maneuver their own situation, they've got to be very careful that they don't slip up. Imagine a situation where they go and try and maneuver it and they actually don't succeed. And I think that might be a very, very dangerous thing. Of course, their likelihood of succeeding is very, very high, right? Because they only need 50% of parliament and they already have about 220 members. So it would take a lot for them not to make it, especially with the support of the opposition. But I think at the same time, the opposition could turn on them, right? Because chaos in the ANC would be good for the opposition. So I think they're thinking around the really difficult issues that they could face, and hopefully that the president actually, and I think at the same time, if you think you are, a motion of no confidence, of course, dissolves the entire government. And that is a long thing, because then they still have to now start a new government, and then Cyril Ramaphosa has to start from scratch. And that elongated process will also give us a little bit of uncertainty. So I think that there's a lot of things here that are happening that we should be concerned about.
Yeah, indeed. If what you're saying pans out and there has to be a new government, etc., what then happens to budget? Malusi Gigaba came out yesterday on CNN saying budget is going ahead as normal. But now, if those factors arise, what then happens with budget? And if it's pushed out, what practical constraints on the work of SA Inc. will that have?
Exactly, and I think a lot of people, of course, I mean, most of us plan around budget, right, because we want to hear, what plans the government has in terms of the coming year, issues of tax, issues of spending. You'll find some corporations, of course, know that, if you increase spending, for example, in infrastructure, that they can, put that into their own budgets and their own plans. So that's an important part of actually how we do things, and certainly these postponements actually hold a stalemate, because remember also that we need some stability. I think to have now, for example, another new minister, including if actually we were returning an old one into the finance ministry, that would still require a period of transition, of thinking through issues. So it's not a particularly good thing. But I think one of the things that we've been talking about is to say there is a lot of possibility for tensions throughout this year, actually. We're going to have to struggle getting through a lot of political issues that will have impact on economic issues. So we should actually just price that into our minds, that we are going into some very uncharted grounds, and it's going to be an elongated process rather than it's just going to be the first few weeks or first few days after this, because there's a lot of maneuvering that must happen within the ANC.
If we can assume that everything's going to run as planned, budget happens next week, the whole issue around taxes is being discussed. They're going to have to raise taxes, and VAT is one of the issues. VAT, people have a problem with it because it's regressive and it tends to hit the poor, etc., etc. But now, if they do go ahead with that, isn't there a danger that as they raise taxes and the Reserve Bank seemingly is unwilling to cut interest rates, it puts a whole lot of pressure on the South African consumer? And doesn't that mean that we could derail the actual growth project that we're seeking to achieve?
That's absolutely one of the biggest concerns. Now, remember, of course, as you say, that we already, of course, in terms of government spending, quite tight. Increasing taxes will not lead to increased spending. So actually, you are keeping fiscal policy quite tight. You are actually also taking away money from consumers. And I mean, I think the VAT situation, you could, find different ways of actually maybe helping the poor. There are rated kind of goods, milli meal and those kinds of staples. But at the same time, also we introduced a new tax they've been talking about, and I think approved. They certainly approved the sugar tax. And the sugar rate tax is something that, is supposed to obviously keep us healthy. But it possesses very high dangers of also, because we're going to take down, big companies like Coca-Cola that have been investing here will be affected, jobs will be affected. Of course, farmers in sugarcane will also be affected. So there is a lot of things in tax itself that actually are negative for the kind of environment that we are finding ourselves in.
All right. We're going to leave it there. We've run out of time. Thank you so much, Kwanti. That was Kwanti Pai. He's an economist and director at Nasen's Advisory. We go back to you now. At Nasen's Advisory, we go back to you now.
Morning, welcome back. Time for the sport. Now, Rohit Sharma scored 115 from 126 deliveries to guide India to a comprehensive 73-run win over South Africa in the 5th ODI played at St. George's Park in PE. The victory sees the touring side clinch the 6-match ODI series 4-1 with a game to spare. Here's Otis Gibson, the Proteas coach.
It was a great effort, I thought, by the bowlers. And we let ourselves down with the bat. There's not a lot more to say than that. We let ourselves down with the bat, and it's, it's something that we've been talking about for 5 games now. We show that the Wanderers that we could play better than we have done, but tonight was disappointing. I think Hash worked really hard to try and rebuild, but every time we started to look like we were going to rebuild, we lost wickets, and we just kept losing wickets. And obviously with, the 4 bowlers, we needed our batsmen, our best 6 or 7 batsmen, to try and bat the bulk of the overs, and we weren't able to do that tonight. You want to have a group of people, a group of players that can adapt to different conditions and play accordingly, and we know that we have those players. They haven't produced it in this series, and that's disappointing. But I think, the way we've played as a group, in some games has been very disappointing, especially tonight, because tonight was, there was still a lot to play for in the series, and that's a disappointing thing. But going forward in one-day cricket, when I came here, we spoke about building for the World Cup and towards the World Cup. In England in May and June, I don't believe that the ball will spin as much as we've seen here. I think India's got two world-class spinners, and they might probably spin it anywhere, but you know, we've got a whole year to learn to deal with that sort of stuff, but I don't believe that it will spin that much in England in July next year, June, July next year. I said from September that we were going to look at new players. We've seen Klaassen came in and has done very well. We've seen Ngidi in one-day cricket for the first time. He's also done reasonably well. Aidan Markram's been asked to captain, and he's shown glimpses. He's shown what he, you know, some glimpses. I think he's. I don't know whether that's been too much for him. You know, it's something that I will have to review myself. I don't know if the whole responsibility around captain has been too much for him, but it seems to me that he's trying to bat in a way that is not the Aidan Markram that I saw in September, and I've spoken to him about that, you know. But we've seen some new faces, and you know, we've seen, I set out to see new people, and we've seen those, and then we'll have to assess where we go, how we go forward from here.
Now, just 4 more spots are up for grabs for the Nedbank Cup's round of 16. To date, 12 clubs have advanced to the next round, and 4 of those are from the lower divisions in South African football. 2 other clubs from the lower divisions are guaranteed a place in the second round.
The Nedbank Cup is South Africa's version of the FA Cup in England, and it usually lives up to expectation. Teams from the second tier, as well as amateur ranks, often cause major upsets, and it has been no different this year. NFD side Ubuntu Cape Town caused the biggest upset of the round when they knocked out Premiership side Polokwane City in the first round. In fact, most of the lower division teams gave their more fancied opponents a good run for their money. But for some teams who failed to advance, it was a blessing in disguise, as this would probably give them enough time to focus on improving their positions on the log. Currently 6th from the bottom on the Premiership log, Nedbank Cup defending champions SuperSport United desperately need to improve their position on the log.
Definitely. You know, that's where I said the focus was before kick-off here tonight. Tonight was all about us wanting to give some of these young boys an opportunity. We would have loved to have gone through, obviously, you know. But yeah, the league has to be our focus, and we gave a number of the boys rest. They'll only be back at training on Tuesday, and then it gives us a whole week to prepare for the Platinum Stars game.
For others, finishing in the top 8 bracket is priority.
You know, once again, we move forward with more injuries. We're hoping to get more players back, but the situation has worsened. But yeah, we'll keep fighting. There's 10 league games to go now, and we'll focus on that.
Another Premiership side will not make it to the last 16 of the Nedbank Cup when relegation threatened Platinum Stars host Baroka FC in Phokeng. The high-flying Free State Stars will visit NFD neighbours Super Eagles in Bethlehem. In the all-NFD clashes, Stellenbosch FC will welcome NFD log leaders Highlands Park, and Richards Bay FC will be at home to Young Tigers. The second round draw, that won't have seeded teams, will be conducted in Johannesburg tomorrow evening. Sfeso Ramara, SABC News.
So we put it up for you, a quick fixture list for you for a quick look-see to see what's going on. As you can see, it's at Umhlatuzi Sports Complex. We've got Richards Bay against Bloem Young Tigers. Goble Park is where Super Eagles play Free State Stars. This is for early and late afternoon. And Platinum Stars, they play Baroka at the Bafokeng. And Athlone Stadium is where Stellenbosch, they play Highlands Park. Those two kicking off at 7:30 p.m. Now, American Shaun White has become the first snowboarder ever to claim 3 Olympic gold medals. White won the men's snowboard half final at the Winter Games in Pyeongchang in South Korea with a score of 97.75. It was also the United States' 100th overall Winter Olympics gold medal. Norway currently leads the all-time list with 121 golds.
Are we going to see the back-to-back 1440s? Yes, we are.
White had already won gold in the event at Torino in 2006 and in Vancouver 4 years later. He overtook Japan's 19-year-old Ayumu Hirano in the last run of the final to bag the USA's 4th gold medal at this year's Games. Hirano had to settle for silver, while Australian Scotty James claimed the bronze. Canadian short-track speed skater Kim Boutin's Olympic dream has quickly turned into a nightmare. Boutin won bronze in the 500 meters final after second-place South Korean Choi Min-jung was disqualified for interference. The Canadian social media accounts were then inundated with abuse from angry South Koreans, attacks the International Olympic Committee condemned.
None of us, unfortunately or fortunately, can control social media, and public has their right to say things, but clearly we would ask everyone to respect the athletes and their performances, and to support the great work they've done and to support the Olympic spirit.
Meanwhile, Mother Nature continued to have her say on the Games. The women's slalom, scheduled for Wednesday, was postponed to Friday due to gusting winds. It's the third time in the opening 4 days that an alpine skiing event was postponed due to wind.
If the wind continues to blow for the next 15 days, then I guess it might be a problem. But at present, everything is okay. As we've said before, the International Ski Federation is well used to disruption by wind, by too much snow, by too little snow, by too much rain, by all sorts of things.
And Switzerland's skiing team has found creative ways to pass their downtime at the Games. The team shared videos on social media of what they're up to when they're not training. The videos have accumulated around 600,000 views between them and mainly features freestyle skier Fabian Bosch, who will be in official action on the slopes on Sunday. Liesel Sankel, SABC News.
And that's it. That's all we've got in the sports for today.
That's a wrap-up of SABC Newsroom this very happy Valentine's Day to you and yours if you are celebrating.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Chocolate and cake for me, and for you?
No, I'm on a diet, Kendall, so maybe we'll have to try another way. Until tomorrow, we'll see you again between 9 and 12 p.m. Bye-bye.
Ligamos.